Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Long Meadow Fiscal Year 2020 Budget Forum. And the agenda for this evening is that we are going to have a budget forum. It's a presentation primarily by the town manager and our chief financial officer, Paul Pasturzik. That's at 7 o'clock, and at 7:30 we're scheduled to have a special select board meeting. The select board meetings will be reviewing an issue with the DPW construction project, but then spending most of the time doing a review of the budget, followed by discussion and approval of the meeting for the annual town, for the warrant for the annual town meeting. So without further ado, we're going to turn this over to Stephen Crane and Paul Pasturzik, who will go through our budget presentation. You're on.
Good evening. So I would like to thank the select board for putting together this forum. I'd also like to thank the department heads for attending here tonight. They're here to answer questions that may come up about the budget and address any specific areas of their department. Before I begin, I want to thank Paul Pasturzik for, once again, his outstanding work in helping prepare the annual budget. This year we started off with a goal of only increasing property taxes by 2%, as opposed to the 2.5% that has been the traditional increase in compliance with the state law, Proposition 2.5. The reason why that was a strong goal for us was because of the tax ceiling that we've talked about, that we are approaching the $25 per thousand, and we want to continue to put as much space between us and that in that year we may hit that. I'm pleased to say that we have achieved that goal of a 2% levy increase, and I'll go through some of the things that we were able to do to achieve that. So the fiscal year 2020 town manager's budget is balanced once again without the use of reserves. I think that I don't know that in fact I'm confident we have not used reserves in any of the budgets I've prepared. It's a hard and fast rule for us to not do that, and so this budget once again does not use reserves to fill budget holes. We are only increasing property taxes 2%, as I mentioned, the allowable 2.5%, and we are maintaining mostly level services. There are some service areas that we are actually increasing, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. We do fully fund the school committee's request. We fully fund the town manager's capital plan, the recommended capital plan that is being reviewed by the capital planning committee as we speak. And it also increases the stormwater fee to offset increased stormwater costs. It also includes the second annual mitigation payment from MGM, which is about $280,000. We did get an increase of 6.2% in state aid, which is not as large an increase we received last year, but still pretty good, especially going back a few years. And we do project a 5% increase in local receipts. A lot of that is tied to our ambulance revenue. So as you can see from the pie chart, in the operating budget by function, the schools, once again, are the largest share. They are at 51%. I will say over the last, I think, 4 years, I think we've gone down in that percentage, and that's a credit to the schools and their conservative budgeting practices, and I think it also has to do a little bit with enrollment, but they are 51%. Employee benefits is 15%. That's the second largest category at $10 million. A lot of those costs are set by others, for example, the Hampton County Retirement Board and Scannick Valley Health Collaborative. And then we have Public Works as the third largest category, and then Public Safety and Debt Service and Community, and then Community Services, General Government, and Planning Community Development coming in at the end. In terms of spending categories, once again, we are in the people business, so salaries and employee benefits comprise most of the budget, 70% of the budget. Debt service and the expense category is are the other two large categories. Expenses includes a lot of things. It's not all of the expenses are discretionary, so that's why that's a fifth of the annual municipal budget. So just some the summary of the departments for FY20. Now this is just the general fund. General government goes up 0.6%. Public safety goes up about 2.9%. Planning and community development goes down 0.2%. That's in relation to attrition largely. There was not a reduction in services. And then the schools go up 2.36%. Public works 2.9%. Community services goes up 4.45%. We'll talk about that in more detail in a minute. Debt service goes down 6.64%. It should be noted that the borrowing for the new senior center has not started yet, so that's why that number goes down. That it'll probably be an increase next year as a result of the senior center debt. And then employee benefits and liability insurance is about 7.5%, which is, I'll say, not bad. It's been pretty consistent in the 8% range. So just want to focus on two specific issues. The store's library, as I mentioned, it goes up about 4.5%. We were able to increase the hours of operation from 50 hours a week to 59 hours a week for relatively minimal costs. And by that, the minimal cost is taking an existing 28-hour-a-week benefited position that became vacant due to retirement and increasing the hours and converting that to a 36.5-hour-a-week benefited position. So we get, for the sake of those 8 hours, we are able to provide a greater level of service for the library. So it represented a very good value, which is why I'm recommending it. The increased hours help with our formulas for achieving what's called the municipal appropriation requirements from the Mass Board of Library Commissioners. As you know, we've been receiving waivers for many years because we don't hit the requirement that they have. A number of years ago, there were, I would say, half the municipalities, and when I say number, I mean maybe 5 or 6 years ago, maybe half the municipalities were receiving waivers. I know it was a large number. Today, we are only one of, I think, 18 communities that still gets a waiver. So not only increasing our commitment to the library so we can not need a waiver in the future, but also counting what we actually spend on the library were both priorities this year. To that end, we did increase the books and periodicals line items and the technology line item to fund the MBLC, the Mass Board of Library Commissioners formula targets. I will also say that the Library Board of Trustees continues to supplement those expenses with generous contributions to the library. And then another change that was made was the facilities maintenance costs were in the DPW budget under library maintenance line items, and we moved those line items into the library budget for clarity purposes so people could see the true cost of operating the library. It's not a lot. It's about $13,000 a year, so not a lot of money moved around, but we at least now can quantify that within the library's department. So that's really the big driver of that 4.45% increase. And as I said, we're still going to require a waiver in fiscal year 20. I mentioned at the beginning, this is the second year of the MGM payments, the surrounding community annual payments, as I note here on the slide. Those payments, it'll be 15 payments, which is the 15-year term of the initial gaming license. And we, as you know, we received upfront money in the amount of $850,000. The sum that we will be receiving year one was $275,000, and then we'll be receiving that amount plus 2% increase each year. So this year it's $281,875. Next year it'll be that number times 1.02. So last year in year one, we used that debt service payment. In FY19, we used that payment to offset debt service for Engine 2, which is the primary response vehicle for incidents on I-91. As the board remembers, the compelling reason that we were awarded the arbitration, that we won the arbitration, was because of the impact that the casino could have on Interstate 91, which is a big driver of cost and resources consumed for especially the fire department. So for year two, for FY20, we are recommending that because we were not able to fully fund our pavement preservation program at a 2% levy increase, we're using some of that money to offset pavement preservation to fully fund that amount. And we are also using part of that to fund a stipend for a crime analyst that'll help us track data related to casino impacts. And that's what's called for in our surrounding community agreement. And then we will also be paying off the remaining debt service on Engine 2. We've talked about the annual mitigation money in the past, and our approach right now is to take it year over year and see what the needs are. As I mentioned, I think last time we spoke about the budget, there may be needs in the future that will be more important to receive that money, such as we may want to do a townwide, security camera system or something like that, and those funds could help offset that cost. But for this year, we felt like these were the most needed areas. The casino's only been open for about 7 months, and we haven't really seen any significant and adverse impacts thus far that we can really quantify. So we're going to keep monitoring that and see what will drive our needs in the future. And then the available fund balances, we have $500,000 in free cash. Our operational stabilization is $3.8 million. We talk about the operational stabilization a lot. The percentage of our general fund that the bond raters want, the rating agencies want to see. I think we're on the low end of that, but we continue to try and improve that each year. So I think we've steadily grown that over the last few years. In fact, I want to say it was probably up $1 million in a relatively short period of time.
It's been about $400,000 or $500,000 annually that we've put in there the last 3 to 5 years.
And we're going to, like I said, as the opportunity presents itself, we're going to continue to try and invest in reserves. Capital stabilization is about $145,000. Water retained earning is at $518,000. Sewer retained earnings at $890,000. Solid waste recycling at $22,000. And ambulance reserve at $132,000. That's about the end of the formal presentation. I try and keep it brief. And like I said, I just will open up for questions, comments for the departments.
Okay, thanks, Stephen, thank you.
For those at home, the select board's already heard this once already, so this is more for...
Those are my words, that the select board's heard this once already and asked preliminary comments based on that. And what we're going to do is go into a more detailed review of the budget at in our select board meeting, which was going to follow this immediately. So, I don't know if we want to go through this of any general comments that we haven't already asked, as opposed to get down to the nitty-gritty, or just thank you for the budget review, and ask our department heads, who are all here, to hang around a little bit, because we'll get to you very, very briefly as we go through the budget and the budget process of reviewing. So, seeing no other questions, what I'm going to do is call the select board meeting to order at 7:15, and as we always do, we're going to start the select board meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the select board this evening has essentially a 3-item agenda. The first item is that there's some uncompleted business for the construction of our, related, I guess, to the construction of our DPW facility. As most people know, that during the construction process, we uncovered what's called asbestos-containing material, ACM, that was part of the tennis court surfaces, that when the facility was torn down or dismantled following a fire many years ago, this material was buried under the under the parking lot, and we identified it at the time that we were digging up the parking lot as part of the construction. And unfortunately, this material, which was probably just a small amount of material, had been buried and dispersed, and in order to dig it up, there was an awful lot of dirt that came with it and other things that came with it, and so we ended up with many thousands of cubic yards of asbestos-containing material, a very low percentage, and after looking for multiple manners to dispose of this, not the least of which was, among which I should say, were paying somebody to cart it out of state to a hazardous waste landfill, digging a very big hole on site and putting it back in the ground where it was. We chose a third option, which was take it to Tina Lane, which is the unclosed landfill in the town of Longmeadow. And with the cooperation of the Mass Department of Environmental Protection, we were able to do that. It wasn't without some cost, but we moved it down there. And now the requirement is that landfill, which was abandoned, I guess is the best way to put it, in the late 1970s. My guess is 1976, 77, maybe 78, something like that, but was never officially and scientifically or legally closed, now needs to be capped and closed. And so tonight the first step is to what's called put a temporary cap over the piles of dirt that we brought down there, because the dirt does contain a non-friable, which means it's not going to get in the air, it's not going to be able to breathe, it's not going to be soaking into water tables down below. It's trapped in the material it's in, but nevertheless, as somebody said to me the other day, if somebody goes down there, a little kid goes down there, you don't want them eating the dirt. So we need to cap that. And so tonight the request was to actually put a temporary cap on the landfill. That'll protect it temporarily while we go and find the money and the manner in which we're going to permanently close the landfill. And this is really it was a pay me now or pay me later, and the town in 1978 decided to pay them later. Well, today is later, or this year is going to be later, or next year is going to be later. At some point, we do need to permanently and officially and legally cap that landfill, and I think people at home will hear more about that at our town meeting coming up this spring. But tonight the request is to provide funds that will be paid for out of the DPW construction project contingency line item, but because it's a change item, the select board needs to approve it, and the funds are, as I read it, Stephen, $158,054 to provide funding for temporary cap of the landfill, of the material that has been moved down to the landfill.
Is that a new change order?
Yes. So the original change order bill was a cost to amass the material. There's a second change order to move it to the landfill. That's all been done. And this one is now to cap the landfill. Is that?
Yeah, so let me just talk about
Go
the
ahead.
timing there, Mark. When we got the original cost estimate for stripping, trucking, and stockpiling the soils, we got that estimate and we went to DEP to get approval for that process. As a part of the permit that was not in that original cost estimate, they required the temporary capping with just dirt while we pursued funding and engineered the permanent cap. I will say the original landfill did have a vegetative barrier, but not that was for the 1979 standards, not the standards that we have today. So that's why for, I think, over 10 years, we've been working with the DEP on coming up with a plan for doing this, and the soils situation that Mark referred to accelerated that effort. The other option that we had, as the board remembers, was trucking it to Ohio, which would have cost $2 million more than we spent. We spent a lot of money, no doubt, but it would have been $2 million on top of what we had already spent. So we saved the town a lot of money by doing it this way, and now we're also accelerating a program that we were kind of on the hook for. The reason why, like I said, to go back, the reason why the temporary capping was not a part of the original change order was because it was a requirement of the permit that we received after we had approved the original change order.
Okay.
And I guess we should add, Mark, that we've both been in dialogue with the governor's
I was just
office.
gonna add that, right. So,
And so I think we do have a warrant article for town meeting, but we are pursuing the permanent cap funding
right.
still.
So for the select board members and even the people at home, that there was an article or a legislative article approved in the Mass State Legislature last fall, which called for $1.3 billion, I think, or something like that, for environmental projects. And amongst that was $5.2 million for capping the Long Meadow landfill. And apparently this is a kind of a motherhood and apple pie legislative thing that's passed every year, and very little of the money is ever released. And I guess Stephen, and to some larger extent myself, took it upon ourselves to see if we couldn't, in fact, get this money released for the town of Long Meadow this year. And so, as Stephen indicated, we've been in dialogue and had multiple phone conversations with the governor's office, and the final statement, and one of the reasons I actually accelerated this past week was I am under the impression, and I believe that the constraints of the funding from the state are that if you spend the money, this money cannot be used to reimburse a community that's already spent the money. It's for doing new projects that haven't been done. So if we approve the money, spend the money, the state will not reimburse us, and the money kind of goes to waste. And so we wrote a letter back in February that, you know, I'd written on behalf of the select board asking them to release the money. And this week we've been in a couple of different conversations with them. And the way the system works, just so everybody hears what I heard, was that the only way that money gets released is part of a springtime capital plan for the state. And so they request that all departments throughout the state, whether it's DEP or, you know, probably the state police or any other department, submit their capital needs, and then the governor and a committee goes through and releases money against capital needs. And they assume that not all of that, you know, $1.2 billion was going to even make its way into the capital plan, if you will. And we made a case that certainly the project for the town of Long Meadow ought to get into that capital plan. And we've asked them to put that on a path so that we'll know about that prior to our town meeting before we do the expenditures. I had 2 or 3 phone calls. Stephen had 2 or 3 phone calls with them, and it looks like they, you know, are working to try to get that on a path to give us an answer. That doesn't mean we'll get the money, but we're further down the road than we would have been had we not made these phone calls. And so we're really at a point where our understanding is that, you know, the temporary cap is not really going to upset our capabilities or our ability to get and spend the money it's going to take to permanently cap this town landfill. What we've actually asked them for is, I think, $2.6 million, $2.5 million out of the $5.2 million that was in the original bond bill, and to allow us to cap the landfill. And so we'll hear more about that hopefully prior to our town meeting, and obviously it's on their radar screen, and we'll continue to make it and then let them know that we're looking for an answer before we go to town meeting and the town commits to the money, because once the town commits to the money, you know, we definitely couldn't get reimbursed. So my review of this, I've talked to Stephen, I've talked to these folks at the State House, is spending money on this temporary cap is not going to upset our ability to qualify for the state funding for the.
It's also required. So I think that what this will do is in addition to being required to do it, it does buy us a little bit of time to pursue the money. But I mean, we are still going to be on timetables with the DEP to perform the permanent capping. My hope is that we will receive word on the funding before we have to execute the temporary cap. We'll keep pushing that, but I think it's very likely that we'll still need to have that warrant article for an appropriation from town meeting, so we can meet our deadline with DEP, because that's the primary factor, is meeting our requirement under our permit. Hopefully they can give us some money to help us do that.
So Richard.
Yeah, place a motion to approve the change order as submitted.
Good, motion's made, second?
Second.
Is there a second? Yeah, okay,
I
Bill,
had questions.
Bill seconds it.
Do we
Go
do
ahead,
that
yeah.
during the discussion period?
Right, and that's where we are, Marie.
Okay.
Go for it.
So the last temporary cap lasted 10 years.
It was
What
never
is
really
it?
capped, it was just abandoned.
Well, but there was a vegetative that allowed us to leave it there for a while. My question is, you said a time limit given to us by DEP. Is it really 4-month time limit, or is it a year or two? I mean, don't we have any?
It's the end goal is to have it permanently capped in this construction season.
In this construction, so we're putting $150,000 in for 3 months. Because you're saying this construction season, we've got to spend $2.5 million, and we're now spending $150 just to buy us 3 months?
No, the temporary cap was a requirement as a part of the process.
So it's part of the process. It's not really temporary, it's like the first phase
Right.
of the cap.
Right.
It's not a temporary cap,
It's
so we
just,
can
it's
do
just
the cap.
soil, and then there's an engineered barrier that goes on top of it, and there's some design work still associated. There's grading, and it's more complex than you would, I think, imagine it to be. But it's, I think they call it scrim, but it's actually material that goes over the rest of it as the permanent cap. But because we deposited the soils, they were covered with snow for a little while, so that kind of kept it all protected. But now we have to put, I think it's a foot or two of soil on top of where we brought the soils from the DPW, and then that'll settle, and then we'll do the permanent cap. But there are layers you have to put in as a part of this process.
So I have a few more.
Go ahead.
The 150 is the first phase of this, and you're still talking about 2.25.
No, another 600 to finish the cap.
Oh, another 600, but why are we asking for 2.5?
We asked before we had spent any money back in the fall.
Okay, so it's going to be closer to, so when you go to fall town meeting, right now the
No,
100.
annual town meeting.
Spring town meeting. When you go, you've already pulled the 150 out of the current budget of the DPW. You're asking for another 500,000 at town meeting that will not be part of
No, that'll just be an independent appropriation.
independent appropriation.
Yeah. And we're doing this as a change order with the general contractor for the DPW. We will bid out the capping project.
So I'm just saying there's two different sources of money here. The first temporary cap's coming out of the DPW project. The other, which will be about 500,000.
Out of timing and necessity, we're doing it out of the DPW contingency.
Okay.
The permanent cap, we'll have time to properly engineer and bid that project.
And you need to hear an answer from the governor's office by June?
Yeah, thereabouts.
Now,
They
what if
said
there's...
They said in May that they were going to go through this capital planning project in advance of our June town meeting. That was the story they told.
All right, and if we get the money from town meeting, but then they end up giving it to us late, the state, we can just plow that back?
The money,
or
we're looking at a ban,
Right.
so we just wouldn't borrow the money.
we just have the ban and then not borrow?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, we just wouldn't borrow, we wouldn't pull the ban, we would probably go back in the fall and give back the authorization.
Right.
So it would just be the cost of setting up the ban is what?
No, not even setting
There's
it.
no cost?
We wouldn't even have to set it up, it would just be going back to town meeting and rescinding it in the fall.
Okay. All right.
And that's the outcome I think we all hope for.
All right, thank you.
Any other?
I think my question was answered. This is a step that would have been done anyways, yeah.
Yeah. I guess we haven't talked a lot about this in a while. The one thing I want to say positively is that, you know, the discovering the soils and delaying we've lost about 7 months in the project. The soil transport and stockpiling part that I think was 1.7 million, that went as good as it could possibly go. And it went faster and better and less, it was like a non-event for the residents along the route. They did a good job keeping it clean, you know. In something like this where you're trying to make lemonade out of the lemons, I do want to commend, you know, our owner's project manager and our engineer and the contractor, quite frankly. That went, like I said, as good as it could go, and they did an excellent job complying with the DEP permit. So I want to, that was a success in the midst of, you know, a fail.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion to approve the change order? Any opposed? The vote is 4-0. Thank you. Okay. That's the only non-budget item on our agenda tonight, so we're going to go to a reviewing of the budget. And so what I'd like to do is propose that we pull out the budget things, and traditionally, we've started at the top and kind of gone through the budget section by section or division by division, and we propose that we do the same thing. So, Stephen, I don't know if you or Paul want to lead each section, or if, you want us to just start at the top and start, identify the sections and see if anybody has any questions about them. I just assume if you feel comfortable, we'll just start at the top. I'll identify sections and we'll see if anybody has any
It's up to you. We can free form it, or
Well, I just don't want to be jumping back and forth, only because sometimes it's tough for us, much less anybody at home, to follow what we're doing. So I just soon start at the beginning. And so the budget process really starts with revenue, and I'm looking at the budget summary system, which is a revenue assumptions, and just want to ask if anybody has any questions about revenue assumptions.
Which document is that? Because I had the budget open,
Okay,
worksheet
well,
master.
I'm looking at this vertical one that we've got that.
Which
Paul-
is that on the,
Hold on, I'll
Did we bring any hard copies on Mark?
no, I didn't bring any. Well, I had one that I printed for myself, but I apologize.
because I don't see that as part of the package.
Yeah, it was.
what's that?
What he's referring to here.
It was in the package last week.
Yeah,
The
right.
budget documents were in the packet last week.
Yeah,
Beginning
but
of today,
so
this
I
is the
have to
last
go,
one.
so you're gonna have to give me a minute to go back to last week's package.
In the
Yeah.
packet today, I think it's the last.
So we go back to what date
I'll
are we
just-
given
I'll
that
just pull it
package?
This is something.
Oh, the last file. It's 2C FY20
Right.
SC 228.
I'm sorry, is it on what package? Do I have to
The
go
one
back?
tonight.
It is tonight's package.
It's in the budget form subfolder.
Yeah, it's in tonight. It's called, right, it's called FY 2000 Budget SC 22819.
All right, let me find it.
Excuse you.
Yeah.
All right, show me which one.
The last one.
This one?
Yep.
Okay. It's not opening.
It won't open for you?
No, the master sheet opens, that's not opening.
Okay, well, if you want to, you can look on with me, because mine opens and for some reason. So if you want to look at this one, or here.
Let me try a
You wanna take
download.
this, my computer? Just-
Well, I may just try full download to see if that's going to do it.
Anyway, yeah. Right here.
Okay.
Because I've got the open budget. So the question is, the first one is sources summary, which is property taxes, state aid, and just shows,
I got it.
you got yours opened up?
Yeah.
Okay, so. Just
Thanks.
if there, just want to know if anybody has any questions about the revenue assumptions or the revenue numbers that are coming in here. The biggest thing is it shows a reduction in school special revenue by $250,000, and I assume that's because that's what the state's telling us, or the way the formulas work out.
Right, I think it's mainly their circuit breaker money and their school choice money that they're expecting in FY20, as opposed to what was, the budget for FY19. I think it's those two sources, and I think the school superintendent had actually gone over those
Right.
numbers when they presented to the selectmen a week or so ago.
So the overall, the big item, the bottom line is the total operating revenue is $73,790,000, give or take, which is up about $2.1 million over the prior year. So that's what the numbers show, and just want to know if anybody has any questions about those numbers. Marie, go ahead.
I have a couple of questions. One is, when you talk about the revenues that go into the budget, you don't mention the MGM.
The MGM is part of the local receipt line item.
Oh, so you put that in there?
Right.
Okay.
If you looked on page 2 of that, you would have the detail of that number if you wanted to see any of the detail, but it is part of that number.
And then, last year, stormwater was 200,000?
Last year, or this current fiscal year, FY19, we expect $200,000.
And we're this year expecting, we're asking for 292, an increase of 92,000.
That is correct.
And we're increasing it because we're putting the projects? Is it being driven by the projects you're putting through it?
You know what, I actually did a little workup on this. So that's probably just easier to hand these out, just to go through it. It's mainly being driven by the overall budget of the stormwater fund itself. That if you look at the actual, the budget for FY 2019 is $652,000. It is expected to go up nearly $200,000 to $842,000. And you may recall that prior to Stephen and I developing the budget, we did try to have a discussion about how the select board wanted to go with this stormwater fee, and I don't think there were any conclusions drawn. But what I actually did is, or one of the options were, being in an enterprise fund, it should be technically fully funding itself. And we didn't want to do that overnight. We wanted to basically get there over a period of time. So in FY19, the $200,000 that is estimated for revenue covers about 31% of the budget. So what I tried to do is take a small step that is going to cover a higher percentage of the budget in FY 2020, and basically the $292,000 represents, it covers about 35% of the budget. So you now have, and that would equate to a monthly fee for the equivalent residential unit going from $2.25 to $3.39.
Go ahead, keep going.
So one of my concerns was that when we first did stormwater, it was to cover the cost that the testing and the MS4 was going to require. And we targeted that, I guess, to be about 200,000. Even though the MS4, did it end up clicking in last year? Or
It
no?
did, yeah. In between then and now, MS4 was promulgated fully.
Yeah,
And is now in effect.
Okay, and our discussion, when we had these preliminary discussions about making it as true stormwater utility and putting stormwater projects through that, and you were talking about increasing, my concern was the whole point of the stormwater wasn't just to start building up a second revenue, because all of this used to be run through general fund. So if you're going to start building the stormwater to pay for these projects are no longer being paid in the general fund, so it should be decreasing the taxes on the alternate side.
And to some degree, the bottom of this kind of shows that if you look at FY 2019 below the gray line, that we had unused levy capacity in 2019 of $102,000. And that equated with a average valued home of $362,900, that the homeowner actually saved about $17 last fiscal year. That now when you take that picture and you look at it for FY20, that we've met the goal of not going up the full 2.5% for FY 2020, and for that average home of basically $363,000, the homeowner is going to save about $40, a little over $40, which nearly equates to what they're going to be paying in the stormwater fee.
But that's really not money they're saving, it's money that you're not taxing them.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, in other words, in other words, we could say we could tax you the full levy, we're not going to tax you the full levy. But, so you're saying that even though we said we were going to pump that down off of the levy, and I still think it should be cutting down more.
Maria, I
from
don't know, I just want to kind of play mediator here, because what I think I hear Paul and Stephen saying is that the amount of money we need to spend in the stormwater bucket, in the stormwater line item, if it was in the general fund, would be costing the average homeowner $40.02, because the taxes would be 11 cents higher. The tax rate would be 11 cents higher. But because we created it, a separate fund. The taxes are 11 cents lower, right? And they're not paying $40.02 on average, but rather they're paying $40.68 through the stormwater utility. So there's an offset of, if you will, 66 cents that people are paying for the stormwater. That's the only true added charge relative to had we not created a stormwater utility. Is that a fair?
It's 80%.
Okay, so what's 100%, Paul?
Well, the fact of the matter is, again, the stormwater budget is going up nearly $200,000. So you would have to take, and we're saving on the levy capacity $241,000. So the homeowner would really be it would be probably like $38 that they'd be saving, as opposed to the 40 in taxes. If we moved all that back to the tax levy, of that $40 that I show here, they would probably have to pay $38 as opposed to the 40.
And what would pay for the other?
You would still have $40,000 left in unused capacity.
Okay.
But haven't you also infused the money, the MGM money was never intended to offset debt. And you've infused that, so it seems like we're infusing a lot of money in the budget. This is worse than the federal budget right now.
We're actually paying the debt on Engine 2, which is the main unit that responds to calls.
Well, I
on
understand that, but I remember in the negotiations, the main thing in this town was traffic. That was the mantra that was carried with the banner and the flags, and now all of a sudden we're coming back and saying that this was the most important expenditure we got, and that's just hard to believe. That we're offsetting $300,000 or $400,000 in debt on a purchase that we authorized to make that had really nothing to do with the casino. We had a vehicle before then. We were replacing a vehicle.
Richard, if I can, I just want to step in and let people know we made a shift here from talking about the stormwater utility, which Marie was talking about, to you're now talking about.
Yeah, I don't think you need to explain. I think they can follow me,
Okay.
Martin. It's all the same thing. We're isolating and looking at one little thing here, and it looks like it's really rosy, and we've done a great job. But then on the other end, we've infused clumps of $275,000 twice now. And I think Marie asked earlier, well, where did the money go that was originally allocated? Because we originally had that set up as a bond issue, and we were paying it out of our tax base.
So, I guess not. Would you prefer that we not spend that money at all, the 275?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, where is the money that you've offset? Where is that money gone?
We would have had to cut, probably, again, most of it for FY20 is going to pavement preservation. So we would have had to cut some type of, what could have been a capital item or some other operating cost.
Pavement preservation looks like it's lower than last year, Paul.
No, it's going to be a little bit higher.
It's under 400,000.
I think it's over 400,000. There's two sources on that article.
Right, there's two sources. I'm talking about our source,
Okay.
not the state money.
You're right, it is. I guess I could have taken it out of sidewalk too, and left the $425,000 in pavement, or I could have, again, reduced the sidewalk number.
I guess the only thing I'm a little confused, we're taking this one little piece of paper and we're saying we got all these savings, and we look at the other documents and it's more than just this one piece of paper.
I think he was just trying to illustrate the impact on the stormwater utility.
Well, I understand, Stephen, but the fact is, Marie brought up a very valid point. When we approved the stormwater utility, it was to offset the charges of MS4. The additional money that was going to be expended in this town for the implementation of MS4. It was never meant as the grand of all grand funds to fund every need that we had in stormwater.
I think that's only partially true.
Well, then, okay, then partially, I have a partial memory then.
So we did say that initially, because it did, at the time the stormwater utility was approved, MS4 was still off in the distance. There was a change in national administration, and it seemed in the feedback we were getting from the people who are in that field, our consultants and people like that, were suggesting that MS4 implementation may be delayed even further because it was being challenged in court and there were lots of delays associated with it. But we knew that there were going to be some pre-MS4 reporting and educational and programming things we were going to have to do in the short term. We estimated that to be about $200,000. That's what we proposed. And then, somewhat surprisingly, but we also said to town meeting that in the future, as costs do go up to comply with this really largely unfunded mandate, the stormwater utility fee will ensure that it won't come at the expense of other core services. Mostly because we didn't know when those expenses were going to be set upon the town, but I think we were clear. In fact, we projected when we brought this to the select board what fully funding the utility, what 100% funding for the stormwater utility would be per ERU, like per household. And I think that was about $15 at the time per month.
Yeah.
$15 per month was the kind of full fund. So we spoke at the time about to really fund 100% of the enterprise fund, it's this much, but because we're only having to do a small amount of work specifically for MS4, we're only recommending this much. But I don't think we ever said it was only ever going to be for those small functions, and it's never going to increase.
Yeah, personally, I'm not arguing about spending the money in the stormwater utility, increasing the fees. My concern is, what was our budget directive? It was to keep, was it 2% or 2.25?
The budget directive was to use 2 of the 2.5% increase in the tax levy.
Which you did.
Which we did.
Which you did.
Yep.
But by increasing to the amount, I would prefer us to go and take it even lower, because then you're just taking from one pocket. In other words, you're shifting, but you're not cutting. And so I would prefer almost to do some more cutting on that side to make it up, to show that we are moving from one to the other, because we were supposed to be at 2% anyways. And we're staying at 2%, but we're still bringing this up. I'd like to see, that's the change I would
Right.
like to see in the budget.
Just remember, though, that with the fee, it is paid also by exempt property owners, too.
Exactly.
So.
And so I
there-
want to
there-
see more of that shifting occurring.
And that's what we're doing by increasing the stormwater fee, because they're now part of the paying.
Oh, I like that. I like that. I just wish that you
Yeah,
had
I mean,
pulled the other down.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, you can't, everyone wants to see the tax rate reduced.
Mm-hmm.
And the budget is in your hands. You can recommend any cuts
Yeah.
to get there that you want. We always have a goal of a level service budget, and this year we went with a level service budget that sticks with that uses only 2% of our increased capacity, taxing capacity. The stormwater utility fee, aside from that directive, would likely need to go up anyway, because the demands on the utility are going up separate and apart for our tax ceiling situation. And the trade, if you read this, is, I'll use myself as an example, I'm going to pay $13 more a year in stormwater fee, but because we're not taxing to the full amount, I'm not going to have to pay $42, $44 in taxes. So that's 13 for 44 is really the trade. That seems pretty good to me.
Except that you're not paying, it's not because you're paying the $13 that you don't have to pay the other. That we didn't have to go up to 2.5%. I mean, overall, the town budget went up 2.9% or something like that, right? So the fact is, we found other revenues to put into the town budget. What we found was, I think I'm jumping ahead here, but we found additional revenue from the state that we didn't know we were going to get. We found MGM money and some other local receipts. So that allowed us to raise the budget 2.9%, but only raise taxes 2%.
And maintain level services.
And maintain level services. And I suspect what other might have wanted is, well, if you're only going to if we're only going to raise taxes 2%, maybe we ought to only raise spending 2 or 2.2%. And I don't know, Marie, if that's putting words in your mouth or not, but.
Yeah, but I want to understand the process of that. So let's say we cut a project, and we leave $50,000 on the table, right? But that doesn't decrease anyone's taxes this year. That would have to go towards the fall, and in the fall, we could decrease it some amount, right? Because it's, because we've already set the tax rate.
We set the tax rate for FY19, this
Yeah.
current fiscal
Yeah,
year.
this is
So
all FY20.
we're all talking about next fiscal year, FY20, with what you're,
But isn't it always offset a certain amount of months?
we would not set the tax rate until maybe December of 2019.
Right, and so that's when we would.
Right, so we would have a number of months in between.
So there's always this lag, is what I'm
Well, right,
trying
because you have to figure out what you're actually appropriating to set the tax rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, the board, we had a directive of level service and only increase taxes 2%. The goal was, as I understood it, and honestly, in the tax ceiling task force discussions and with the board, I think we've been pretty candid that there's going to be a mixture of fee increases, looking for other revenue sources and other things to maintain services and keep the tax increases from, and not taxing to our full capacity. We've been clear about that from the very beginning, I think. And so when I gave the presentation the first time last week, I think I introduced this as kind of the first version of what that'll look like.
Rich?
Yeah, I'm not going to labor the point of what we talked about. I think my memory's still pretty good. I paid attention to all of our discussions. I think Mark hit the nail on the head. We taxed 2%, we went up 2.9%, so we had extra money infused in our budget. I'm concerned that that we have a message that we're not increasing the taxes, and that people turn around, they see the water bill coming in and it's got this extra charges on it. So there is taxing taking place. It's in a different format, and I think we've been honest in this room and talked about this. It was a stormwater utility tax. We knew what it was for. My only problem is, and it's the same with the MGM money, it was my impression that the MGM money was going to be used to attack problems that had been identified in the studies. And that we had a long list of projects that we were going to work on, and it wasn't to offset funding on fire trucks and that type of stuff. And that's my only point. The money's coming into us. We won our case, this, that, and the other. But I hate to see us take the money, and I'd use the word squander loosely, or loose lip, because I don't really mean it that way. But we had some real needs that we talked about. And we know that fire truck, we're going to have to buy that fire truck anyway. Regardless of MGM, you know it, and I know it, we're going to buy that fire truck.
Again, that is partially correct.
No, that's 100% correct.
In the casino documentation, if you go
No, I'm
back.
talking about the truck. We were going to buy that truck anyway.
No, in terms of what the money's we spent for, if you go back to the documentation, which we did before we prepared the budget, it's in the slide. I specifically put that language in the slide so we could all be on the same page of what that annual money was supposed to be spent on. It was not for a specific project identified. The specific projects identified in the upfront money was the intersections, the Long Meadow Street intersections, and it is in fact going to that. The annual money was not allocated towards those projects. It was for significant adverse impacts that are identified. As I said, we haven't really identified any significant adverse impacts yet.
Well, the discussion can go on forever. You and I can go out right now and find a significant impact in this community that we could fix with that money.
Not as a result of the casino.
Traffic related, as a result of the casino, because that's why we fought and fought for that money, Stephen.
But it is a data-driven analysis,
I don't
and
care
right
what you
now,
call
I don't care how you refer to it either. It's a data-driven analysis, and the data doesn't show significant adverse impacts related to the casino. We've been tracking it.
I'm talking about what we intended to do, and it's a departure, and I'm going to let it go.
Fine. What we
But that's
intended to
it.
do and what we're actually supposed to do may not be lining up, but I'm following the agreement.
So I'd like to just butt in here. What would the difference have been, Stephen, had we said, we want the average payment of taxes and, controllable fees to go up no more than 2%? which water and sewer may not be controllable because they're based on usage, but some other, that would have made for a different
Directives.
outcome.
Yeah, it would have made it for, certainly, and you can still do that. You can do that.
Right, but because I guess my question is, do we, on the average house, and that's all we can do, on the average house of $362,000, what's their combination of taxes and stormwater fees last year versus, the current fiscal year versus the proposal for next fiscal year? Is it going up 2.1, 2.2, or is it at 2.5?
It's probably going to go up somewhere closer to 2.5 because you're also going to have a debt exclusion for the Council on Aging. We have debt service that is increasing. You may recall when Clark Rowell was here, how we structured that debt to increase every year for next 3 to 4 years.
That was
So-
the one I voted against.
Maybe one they voted against, but that's what was voted by the
Yeah, I
board.
know.
So all those are going to increase. So
Right.
it's not going to be 2.5 because of all the other influences that are on the tax rate. I mean, the Council on Aging alone in their first year
Well, it
will
was the
be...
DPW that was the one that we really stepped
Well,
up.
we simultaneously looked at the DPW and the Council on Aging, and there was a set of numbers that we said we were going to go up every year for 4 or 5
I
years.
remember it. I
So,
remember.
and so it's not going to go up 2.5, it's going to go up something greater than that because of the other influences.
But those are debt exclusions.
But there's still taxes.
Right, but if you, so maybe my question should have been absent debt exclusion taxes, which people voted for to put on top of their taxes, what are,
Then that would have provided us a different criteria
So,
set.
one of the-
I'm just,
Yeah.
but I think that's worth understanding, only because we can say, if in fact, if in fact the stormwater utility causes the impact to be, stormwater plus tax rate without debt exclusion, stormwater plus tax rate without debt exclusion is going up 2.2%, that's important to know, rather than 2, rather than 2.5. That's my only point. And I understand, Paul, your point about debt exclusion
Right.
is
Driving.
totally out of worry.
I'm not saying change the budget. I have a cautionary note when I look at this, and that is, we kept it at 2%, but we had to do it with using money we won't see every year, which is the casino money, and also we started pumping up the stormwater utility. And so I see this as a growing budget, and eventually we're going to run into problems on how we're going to handle this operating budget because it's growing. And later we'll see the FTEs increased and things like that, and both sides, the school didn't stay at 2%. So we are really level service funding, but for substantially more money that's going past the 2%. And we were lucky this year that we found it, but every year we're not going to find it, and we'll
Well,
see how we're going to face it next year.
So, I can appreciate that. We, like I said, level service, we provide a excellent suite of services to the community that the community, I think, values. My experience with town meeting is that they want to see the services preserved. Where we have been able to find ways to achieve efficiencies or reduce services, or maintain the same level for less money, we have taken advantage of many of those. I think where I feel like I was misguided is we had 2 separate meetings where the casino money and how it should be addressed in the budget was a specific agenda item. And the stormwater utility and how it should be addressed in the budget was a specific agenda item. We both asked you for feedback on that before we built the budget, said explicitly, please give us some guidance because we're going to build the budget, and this, we already knew, he knew months ago that these 2 factors were going to be big factors in being able to achieve that goal of 2%. We didn't get a lot of specific feedback from the board, which was fine. We talked about it kind of generally. And so we built the budget applying the fees and the MGM money, which we think is in the most responsible way, which is, yes, the MGM money is only going to be it's annually recurring one-time money. like I say that all the time. I don't look at it as something that's going to be a part of our budget long-term. And so what we agreed to was every year we're going to relook at what are our priorities and what are the impacts, and we may change it around. I said that in my presentation. So I hear the board on the stormwater utility and on the MGM money, but we've been clear that those were going to be factors in the budget and getting to the 2%.
But isn't it true that the cost of dealing with MS4, since that became a law, the stormwater costs haven't gone up because of it? I mean, it just seems to me there are things that you had in your general budget you're doing anyways. They have gone up? But isn't that a lot of that stuff that you did, but now you can identify it as because of it, MS4?
Not exactly. For example, we're supposed to inspect and clean 20% of the catch basins every year. We weren't doing that before, and we put that out to bid last year, and I think the number came in at like 90,000. I think we're funded at 40. We asked for the 90 again this year, so I think we got the majority of that. I don't think it was all there, but to meet that permit, we're going to need to start doing that work, and we're going to need to find the money to do that. And that's an example of something that's changed that we weren't doing before. There's other pieces of it too, but I think the other big number that's in that budget is there's two capital projects.
There's two capital projects,
Over
right.
$100,000
Of debt.
that are now being
Absorbed.
accounted for in this, and before would have been capital projects.
All right, thank
Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we talked, when we did the stormwater utility, we did talk about growing it to the point where we could attribute capital costs to the utility fee. And this is the first year we're really doing that in a meaningful way.
Rich?
You consider Route 5 critical transportation corridor in relationship to casinos?
Not only do I consider it, that the arbitration panel considered it so.
Okay, I agree. I understand right now that we could, if we could put $100,000 towards that, we get our survey work done, then could be in placement for funding in FY24. And we don't have money allocated to do the survey work. We talked about that over a year ago in this room. But that was the first step to get the survey done, because we have to do that, as you know, and I know, that to get us into the TIP program, there's a certain amount that we have to fund. And the survey is $100,000.
Yes. And I think if we made the choice to put most of it towards pavement preservation, if we wanted to reduce pavement preservation and take $100,000 of the money and put in the survey.
Stop right there, please. No, I'm talking about the casino money.
Right, which
You put
most
the
of it is,
casino-
you're
you
not
put the
listening, Richard,
casino
most of it's
money,
going
you
into the
just-
pavement preservation.
Stephen, you put the casino money towards the truck, the fire truck.
Last year, in FY19.
FY19,
That's what you say you're doing this year, too?
It's like 50,000 of it.
52.9, I think.
Okay. We always had pavement management. We always had $300,000 or $400,000 in pavement management.
We always taxed to 2.5%.
Yeah. That's right.
But
We didn't
Not in the
always
last
have
two,
pavement.
not in the last two.
We've only had
What about
$400,000 in pavement management.
4 or 5 years.
That's 4 or 5 years,
Yeah,
right.
4 or 5 years. Okay?
Right. So, like I said, if we want to make the adjustment and take 100,000 out of pavement management or some other capital item and put it towards survey and like pre-design work for the southern side of Route 5, because the northern part of it is
Right.
part of the upfront casino money, I am completely supportive of that. I thought that because, and to be honest with you, I was at the JTC meeting yesterday, and we're looking at we call it the L project,
Right.
the northern end, is far ahead of that southern project, and that's still FY23.
It's 23, right.
Right. So
But-
I don't know that we could leapfrog a bunch of projects.
But
if we spent
24
$100,000 this year.
is open right now. They're filling 24 right now.
It's kind of full. It's full.
But it's being filled. And if we don't show initiative, we don't have a chance in being picked up.
I mean,
And we both-
it's possible that the other one, that the L project, could be bounced to 24. That's what they were looking at.
Well, that always happens.
Right.
But I'm just saying, being proactive, we've talked about it many, many times in here, that we have to be proactive. And the survey is not, I think, last year, we said, you were here.
Yep.
We said, that survey is not going to change once it's performed until we get that contract done. So why don't we get it out of the way? We show a positive initiative. When you go to your meetings, it's a strong credential when you say, hey, we got our survey work done, the select board and the town supports this program, and we're moving forward. It counts a lot of points on pushing projects.
Do you want to make a motion?
No, it's a discussion.
In all candor, I agree with everything you're saying, and you know I do. In all candor, based on what I saw yesterday, we're going to get more mileage out of using it for pavement preservation this year, because I think 24 is not realistic for that project. Especially, and if they give us $6 million for the L project in FY23, I think they're going to have a very difficult time giving us what'll probably end up being $10 million for the other project the following year. So I just think realistically we're further away on that other southern end project. I think a future use of the casino money to pay for pre-design work for that project is completely appropriate and a good idea. Based on the year-over-year discussion we had in FY20, I assessed that the best value was putting it in pavement. But we can change that. Like you said, once the survey is done, it's in the books.
It's done. It never has to be repeated.
Okay, Richard, what I'd like to do is kind of move on from, because this discussion is a good discussion, but isn't going to get to where we need to be tonight, which I just want to spend this discussion time, because I think we always look at line item expenses very, very specifically, and I think it's important to look at income too, because I'd like to think that if we had more income, we wouldn't have to worry about the expenses so much, and we'll talk about that later. But what I want to do is now, Marie, turn to the next one, which is called the fiscal year 20 budget worksheet master.
Yes.
Okay, that's the
one I have.
That's the one, and we're going to do this one. This is the expenses for everybody who's trying to follow this at home. But the first section of it is, and instead of just taking totals, it's called Select Board Town Manager, and the bottom line is a current year budget of $119,600 and a next year proposed budget of $125,600, an increase of $6,000. And I'm sorry, that's not right. That's the I'm sorry, I was reading the wrong line item. It goes from $250,800 to $252,200, an increase of $1,300. And so I just wonder if anybody has any questions about that section of the expense lines.
Which line item was this?
This is the Select Board Town Manager.
Departmental total.
Departmental totals. Okay, I mean, there's a couple of small increases, a couple of small decreases, but essentially it balances. Seeing and hearing none, I'm going to move down to the next part, which is total legal services. Legal services go from $75,000 to $81,000. No, I read the wrong line item again. Total legal services go from $119,000 to $125,600. That's what I was looking for before. An increase of $6,000 in legal expenses, which is 5%. Are there any comments about that or questions? I'll tell you, my comment is I think it's too low. I think what we found is a lot of the things we're trying to do this year are being held up by the attorneys not being able to put enough resources on it, and we haven't spent we may need to get additional resources to do what we need to do.
With the change in the way they're going to operate, that will probably go up anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not as simple as that, Mark. It may be they just don't have the hours to dedicate to us.
No, I'm thinking in terms of like we may be doing for this, Tennessee Gas thing, is go out and get another counsel to help us with this particular projects. I mean, we've got everything on Pillsbury, Wally, Doherty, and they're only giving us so much time in the week, and we've got more than that we want to get done. I'm just wondering if that's enough, and that's all. I'm actually questioning that this is too low.
I don't know where we are on year-over-year, like fiscal year performance, but
We're not doing well this year at all.
I mean, the big thing is we haven't used much in terms of labor relations. Metatrol has supplemented our labor relations needs because they specialize in one of the things that drove a lot of our labor costs were issues that Metatrol specializes in, so we're getting kind of an excellent value from them. As I said, I noted an email today, Doherty Wallace is kind of doing some internal structural changes, and I do think that'll help, quite honestly. But, a lot of the issues that we've had to spend additional money on weren't really driven from the board. A lot of the money we've spent has been in response to something that's happening in the broader community, and that's not really a predictable
Well,
thing.
but we've been doing that every year. I mean, Steve, my only comment is, look, we went to the Finance Committee looking for a release of reserve funds to help with legal fees this year. And we're constantly being told that it's at the lawyer, we're waiting for lawyers, and I just think that getting supplemental legal services, if that's what's holding us up, would be useful. If nobody else agrees with me, I'll move on. But, I feel stymied because of the restriction in, that we're always waiting for a lawyer, that's all.
I don't know if we'll pay them more, they'll work faster, but.
No, but I'm just
Yeah,
saying, if you gotta
that's-
go get a second lawyer for.
Spoken
you're
like a
right.
lawyer, thanks, Marie.
Okay, maybe it won't cost the same. I'm fine.
It just seems like a lot for lawyers, so I'd like to keep it.
That's fine.
125,600.
Fine.
The only thing I was going to say, Mark, is you skipped over the moderator, and I just have to say that I'm glad we don't pay her by the hour.
This year,
Yeah.
right, okay, all right. Yeah, then, the next one is the Department of Administration and Finance, which includes accounting and our audit, I guess, human resources, assessors, treasurer, collector, is that all in?
Town clerk,
And the town clerk?
elections and registration.
And elections and registration, so that's a lot of, yeah. So the entire Department of Administration and Finance, which has a current year budget of $1.6 million, 1.61, is going to 1.62, a total of an increase of $10,000. And so I guess the question is, does anybody have any particular line items? And sometimes just because the bottom is okay doesn't mean there may not be questions on that, so. No, I had a couple, Paul, and they're more questions than concerns, and one clearly is under supplies office, we've got a bunch of money, it says Westcom phones, and I guess the question is, why are we paying for phones for Westcom?
It's basically once Westcom pays for new phones, right, that line item will be reduced.
The line item will be reduced. Potentially, we also had a service agreement that we just actually discontinued, so it could also be reduced in that regard.
So I think all of the town's phones are carried
Yeah, all the town's phones are carried there.
in that line item, and one of the big issues is the
'Cause you also
service
see
to the police department and fire department.
The statement up above it, Mark, it
Possible
says
reduction.
possible reduction because of Westcom
Oh,
phones.
that's all one comment?
That's all one comment, yes.
Oh, okay, I thought that was the two
No.
different line
In fact, I
items.
think we've already ordered the new phone system for our police and fire departments, and that'll be grant funded.
So eventually, you're going to start seeing that going down.
Okay,
Yeah, we canceled the service too, that's
Right.
the big savings.
Right.
Yeah.
okay, thank you, John. If you go down to the assessor's department, assessor's office,
Yep.
there's a noticeable increase in this clerical staff. It says 34 hours and plus second 4%, but what, does that mean they're going up in hours?
No, there was a request for the assistant assessor to go up in hours. It was denied. However, we do have a clerical staff member running that department on a day-to-day basis. And there is a stipend in there right now for her. And as she goes through the certification process, we would be looking to, look at that and see if we need to adjust it even further.
Okay, but the increase is due to the. those are-
That and step increases.
Oh, you want to
Okay.
just put it here?
I think also in FY 2020, there's one extra payday. That would be a small amount, it's 262
Yeah.
days
I'll
as
keep it
opposed to
here.
261. Hey, makes a difference.
Okay. And then, again, under treasurer, collector, staff, clerical, it says shift to the clerk, 10% shift to the clerk.
Right, in that particular case, there's
Okay,
actually
that's the other
a
sheet.
duplication of 10%, that we
On the
take
second
10%
page.
of the treasurer, collector's staff and we actually pay for it out of the clerk's account because they actually cover the window when the clerk only has 2 people in it.
Right.
They actually cover the window, so we actually try to, budget for it properly. So there isn't actually a duplication. That amount could actually come out at $30-something. I just found it late in the game when all this material was done, so I just put the note in there without making any changes, because we would have had to revise all this stuff when I found it.
So what you're saying is that increase of $5,000 is maybe only be an increase of
The
$1,200.
3867 is the amount that
is likely to come out.
That can come out.
Okay, thank you. And I think the other one, I guess I was questioning about was the reserve fund, a reduction in reserve fund from 40,000 to 20,000. Can we do that?
Where are you talking, assessors? Where?
No, the
No,
reserve
reserve
fund
finance.
is right near the end. It's the Finance Committee Expense Reserve Fund.
You went,
So.
I'm down at just above where it says Police Department, like 3 lines above.
oh, okay, so we've gone through assessors and collector and town clerk, and you're all the way down to,
Well, I am, but still in this section, yeah.
oh, here.
I mean, I'm just wondering.
Every year, we do a review of every single line item in the budget. And we look at expenditure trends versus requests. And we often make reductions or increases depending on the expenditure trend and the justification of that with the departments. The expenditures aren't really listed in that line item for the Finance Committee. They're more transfers.
Transfers.
So we did an analysis of the transfers, and the reality is the Finance Committee has not been approving
Yes, sir.
very many reserve fund requests. I think last year it was 10,000, year before was 11,000, and so the same rationale we apply to every line item, we just apply to that one.
But the fact is, I thought the money's in the reserve fund for unforeseen expenses that come up during the year that haven't been budgeted for, right?
That's what I thought too, but
So out of a
They
70,
haven't
out of a
been applying it
71
that
million,
way.
well, but out of a $71 million budget, if we're not, we're cutting literally our, I don't know, rainy day fund or what, it's the reserve fund by half. I think that's short-sighted to do that, to tell you the
So-
truth. Not that, and not, well, and I understand that the Finance Committee has not seen fit to approve any transfers, but maybe it's because we haven't had the true emergencies yet, but we might next year.
if that line item was in another department, the Finance Committee would tell us to cut it in half.
Well, the problem I have is that I don't want to find ourselves in a position of having to call a special town meeting because we need $28,000 or $22,000.
I mean, I can't even remember. Usually when something's like that big of an emergency and we need that kind of money, it's beyond 40,000 anyway. And like I said, we haven't asked for very much, and they haven't given out very much. And like I said, we just applied the same rigor to that line item as we do to all others. I thought that's something the Finance Committee would value.
Okay.
I mean, it's still levy. I mean, we're tying up levy that will sit unused, and it has sat unused for several years.
So it just rolls over to the next year's free cash if we don't use it.
But like I said, you can make that argument about any single line item.
I understand that. Okay. That's fine. Does anybody else have any concern about
No.
cutting the Finance Committees? Okay. Did you review this with the Finance Committee? They had no problems with it either?
It was brought to their attention yesterday.
Okay, if they don't care, I don't care, I guess is the best way to put it. All right, the next grouping that we're going to tackle is the public safety, which is police and fire, and emergency and medical services. And I think I guess we call that total protection of personal property. And the total budgets the current year are 5.275, and next year they're going to be 5.427, an increase of 2.9% or 2.89%. And I guess I wanted to ask anybody about those. We've got our fire chief and police chief here. Marie.
Sorry, go ahead.
Question on the crossing guards. Have we increased the number of guards or increased the pay?
That was the increase in pay.
Oh, so we don't have any additional,
No, there's no additional cost.
okay.
I know I noted this before, but we have a line item for Westcom assessment. That's not new money. That is essentially the dispatcher's salary line item that we took that we divided in half as kind of a placeholder. We expect to be open, hopefully, earlier in the fiscal year with Westcom. But if we hit our target of opening sometime in FY20, we won't need to obviously pay our dispatchers out of Long Meadow. But we do know that we'll have costs to open Westcom that the grant won't necessarily fund up front, that we'll have to pay for in partnership with Chicopee. So that's how we split that line item. Obviously, we're going to hold on to those funds until we, must spend them, and we know that Westcom is certain to open soon.
Chief Stankwitz, I don't know why you went back to sit in the back row. I mean, you're going to be on the, you might as well, Chief Dearborn, you might as well come on up.
No, we're getting lucky.
Yeah, you thought so, huh? Chief Stankwitz, I have the year-after-year question about vehicles. If you can just explain that vehicle replacement line, just so we can understand that.
Yeah, okay. What's going on this year is it's going to be a new model year. Ford Interceptor have been in production from 2013 to 2019. They decided to retrofit the new ones 2020, and with that goes an exponential increase in the cost of those vehicles. Whereas in 2018-19, we were paying $28,000. That was the going costs. They're going up to $34,000 for the gas vehicles, and they're going up to $38,000 for the hybrids. So that's the difference. Also, with that is the when you go with the new model year, of course, the interior of the vehicles are altered, which means some of our equipment isn't going to be compatible with the new model years.
But this is two vehicles, then?
That's correct.
Okay, Marie? Bill?
Did you say hybrids?
Yes.
You
I
have a
did.
hybrid?
And it's not a Prius.
Oh, but you have a hybrid.
No, when we don't have it, no, that's the one that's $38,000.
Oh, I thought you were
But if you
saying
approve this budget,
But if you
you get the hybrid, is that it?
No, there's no hybrid.
that's something.
There's no hybrid
well, it's
plan.
The problem is getting in a new model year with a hybrid. I'd like to give it one more year to see how it operates nationally before we take the plunge and do that. But yes, we are going to do hybrids eventually.
Oh, great, thank
Yeah,
you.
and they are the Ford Interceptor Explorers, which are a police pursuit rated vehicle.
And that's really reasonable, like $4,000 more? Is that what I read?
No, that's $10,000 more than we're currently spending.
$10,000 more?
Yeah, but again,
Look
with
at the
your
savings in
with the
terms
cost savings, they're saying if you put 20,000 miles on that
No.
vehicle a year, you're going to save about $3,000 in fuel costs.
$3,000
Plus
each year.
the cost of
savings.
maintaining and repairing is probably a lot less.
I don't know that yet. I guess that's why. But you're possibly right. You may know more about it than I do.
Well, that's good.
Go, Marie.
Congratulations on your work on the accreditation. That's great.
Oh, thanks. We're getting close.
Now, my
Next
question
week.
is on your police training. You seem to be, you're not going up this year. And is that because you've gotten through most of the accreditation, or it's just where you're cutting in your budget?
No, I wanted to go up. Town manager didn't think it was appropriate that I did.
Yeah, so I'm going to harken back to my comments about trend analysis.
The issue, the reason why I did go up this year, we're having a difficult time with retention right now. We lost 2 officers last year. We had an officer die. We had one just retired. We have another one retiring next year. The cost for sending an officer to the academy is $3,000 per student officer, and I anticipate we're going to be sending at least 4, maybe 5 next year. So that's why I was try to kick it up a little bit, and but we'll manage. We'll have to do what we have to do. The other issue with training this year, next year, is we're going to have to for defensive tactics training. There, instead of 3 hours, we're going to have to move that up to 6 hours worth of training next year, and which we're going to have to bring in an instructor to do so. We have been trying to cut costs. A lot of our instruction, our mandatory instruction, is done through online, but there's some things you just can't do online. There has to be an actual one-to-one, face-to-face training that we do.
Go ahead, keep going, Marie.
Okay.
You're on a roll.
Wow.
You're also, we understand you're starting the program of the cameras monitoring, and you were putting them in the vehicles. Do you have a plan for the next 5 years, or you just have phase one, you've put in the budget already, or?
The in-car video system that you're referring to, yes. As a matter of fact, we go through a warrant article, we got those appropriated.
Right.
Plus, we got one vehicle which is paid for by the Maya grant. We just received those this week. We're going to be starting installation next week. My long-term plan is to see how these operate, see how these function. I know it's going to be I believe it's going to be a benefit to us, but I'd like to transition to, we're going to be looking in a few years, depending on how this works, into body cams, which nationally, that's what everybody's going to.
Yeah, but I think the town manager also talked about further monitoring, camera monitoring throughout town, and you might be looking at the...
Oh, the CCTVs?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely what we're working at. We're
That's
looking at
capital,
this.
that's not an operating budget.
Yeah, I know, but I was
Yeah.
wondering where he's
Yep.
going with it, since we had him here.
Yeah, that's an exciting project. That's something we're definitely looking into. What's happening now is some of the schools, we need to bolster their security and their videos, live streaming of their buildings, exterior buildings. Also, we're working at looking at intersections with the running of the fiber and the availability of that. We're looking to probably enhance. And that goes back to what Richard and Steve were talking about, data gathering. That's going to be one of the tools we're going to use in order to gather data, traffic flow, traffic patterns, things like that, and monitor vehicles coming in and out of town. So that's something we're going to be working on. And I know the schools has a Safe School grant that was under the Criminal Justice Reform Bill, that it's mandatory. So I know they're going to be getting some grant money, and hopefully we can piggyback off of that and start installing some cameras in the schools as well.
But you'll be coordinating with them
Oh, absolutely.
as they roll out and you roll out, so that your programs
Oh,
are
we're working
meshed.
together.
Okay.
That's a great thing about this community, is there's a lot of collaboration, not only on the school side, but and the other public safety partner, fire department, but all the rest of the town departments. We all work together.
Okay. Thanks for letting me go off.
That's correct. All right. Does anybody else, besides me, have questions about the fire budget?
I have a thing for the chief.
Go ahead, Rich.
How about Narcan?
How about what?
How about the Narcan program?
Narcan? Yeah, we utilize Narcan. As far as right now, what had happened is as far as Narcan goes, each officer is assigned a Narcan kit when they go out into the cruisers, and that is deployed upon whenever need is required. Last year, I believe we deployed it three or four times on those in need. This year, we were able to receive a grant through the Bay State Health Network, and we were able to receive vials of Narcan, 4 milligrams containers of Narcan, and we're giving those to each one of our officers, so they're carrying them on a person now.
So you figure you administered 4 times last year?
4 times, yeah, off the top of my head, I believe it was 4 times.
How about your guys, John?
Oh, significantly more than that, yeah. I don't have the data off the top of my head, but, yeah.
Didn't know it was going to be a Narcan question.
No, you know what, Rich, you got me tonight.
Yeah.
But, it's interesting, because the opioid, when you're talking about the opioid crisis, it is impacting us. We're losing people to Narcan, to opioids. But what we're doing is we're working with the MSP, state police, and we're actively looking to prosecute those individuals who are dealing those drugs to those people who have died from use of those. We're working on one case right now, and we're hoping to be able to press charges against that individual, hopefully shortly.
Are you seeing any new trends in law enforcement that you can talk about?
Trends? Yeah, definitely. What we're starting to deal with is more EDPs, more mental health issues right now, and that's becoming a real challenge for us. We're taking more time on calls. We're getting calls from parents of 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 16-year-olds. We're dealing with kids who are uncontrollable. We're getting multiple calls to the same households. What we ended up doing is we're working with Bay State Health Network. We're utilizing their counseling service. They're coming out to the community now. Instead of us just walking away from a residence when we're having a problem, someone who may have who may be autistic or having some other emotional crisis, we're able to bring out professionals out to the community to work with those individuals, or instead of Section 12, instead of having them medically removed and brought to the psych unit down to Bay State, we can actually transport those individuals down to a Bay State Health Network counseling session. So it's really something that's really changed in law enforcement. The other issue we're dealing with also is juveniles. Juvenile laws has changed dramatically with the juvenile reform bill this year, which means juveniles are anybody who commits a crime that it's under the age of 11, is we can no longer charge them. And there are certain juvenile offenses that between the ages of 12 and 17 that are no longer arrestable. So a lot of things we're dealing with. And another thing this year is really big. I hate to keep talking about it, but marijuana. Marijuana is another issue we're dealing with. We're going to be looking at training officers as drug recognition experts in the next few years, DREs. So we haven't seen the full impact of how marijuana legalization has impacted law enforcement or safety of motorists as well.
There's no test for that other than what, blood analysis?
That's correct.
Yeah.
But the problem is there's no legal limit right now to say that just because you could say someone's under the influence of marijuana,
Right.
just like we have a per se law with alcohol. We know that .08 is legally drunk. We don't know what the per se law is going to be for marijuana right now.
You see, I guess in Denver, the police actually have a protocol because smoking marijuana can increase the incidence of schizophrenia, although it might not be causing it.
Wow.
I talked to a psychologist about it. He said it may be there and it just brings it out.
It enhances it, or
Yeah.
yeah.
Working on select
Wow.
board does that too.
We are seeing medical calls related to marijuana use. People are buying the edibles and not realizing how strong they are.
Yeah.
You know, a recent case that we both our agencies dealt with, person bought one of the candies, ate it, wow, this doesn't work too good, ate two more, but we're in had a significant medical event because of it, but we're seeing that fairly regular, so.
And those are older population?
Yep, yeah, we're actually seeing it in our geriatric population also.
Has there been any increase in grant availability to coincide with the legalization of marijuana?
With the opioid, there certainly was, and we've gotten a lot of resources for that. I just don't think the state's caught up to this, and actually, I don't think anybody really understood the impacts. The other thing too, we're seeing that some additional home growing operations in the community, which are a significant fire hazard. They're completely legal, with the exception of the building codes. So that's how we combat those. So
Right.
yeah, we're seeing the job is changing.
Yeah, it's changed, and it was a significant change this year. We've made some
Yeah.
major changes, and the problem is we're not keeping up with training. So it's like, we're not trying to catch up now with next year with training, and it's like, so it's an ongoing battle with trying to train our officer and keep them informed of what's going on.
Thank you. I wanted to, we could just move on to maybe some of the budget line items in the fire and emergency medical services. I don't know if anybody has any specific questions for Chief Dearborn. I guess I have a couple of questions, but I want to precede it with a comment. And this is more to Stephen. Stephen, and we've talked about this. We've talked about it a couple of times. The salary line items are up dramatically. A couple of line items are up. One of them's up 450%. Another one's up 9%. And we've talked about it. I have my answers. I think for people at home, we need to note that those costs are going up, and there've been a lot of discussions about them. I'm not going to ask you to rehash that on the time, but Chief Dearborn, I am going to ask you a couple of questions. So the main one is about repairs and vehicle maintenance, which is going up pretty substantially, and what some of us think have a pretty modern fleet in terms of a new ambulance, a relatively new fire engine or two, and yet we're going up 40% in vehicle maintenance.
Yeah. So. And you also will have a warrant article this year to cover the a shortfall from this year's budget. So do they have the historical costs?
They have a trend.
They have
They
a
have a
trend.
trend.
So the reduction last year was another line item, actually it was a line item cut. When he submitted for, I think, 35,000 for FY19, and I having the same thought that you just articulated, like brand new trucks, we shouldn't need that. Not realizing that there is ongoing kind of routine maintenance. Like if it breaks, it's covered under warranty, but to keep it running brand new, there are routine maintenance expenses that are greater than I anticipated. So that's why now we have to ask town meeting for more money to cover a shortfall, because I reduced the line item for the reason you just said, Mark.
But I guess the question is, what are these vehicles that we're spending this money on? And educate me on, what takes $35,000 to repair?
Well, we have 12 vehicles, so the cost, we do farm out all of our services. So as you well know, if you have any repair done in your own car, well, what just a regular automotive mechanic makes, our repair services, when we send them out, even for routine maintenance, is extremely expensive. I do have a breakdown of all our expenses for the year, and I can certainly provide it to you.
But are we finding it's one or two, it's the...
No, it's spread out across the board, actually, and I actually broke it down per vehicle. Our vehicle maintenance budget is extremely detailed to the 12 vehicles. I have one utility vehicle that's is actually up for capital replacement next year. That had a transmission issue this year. It was $2,000. We had on ladder one at a structure fire. Actually, last fiscal year, we experienced damage to the controller, heat impingement on a controller on it. The actual issue didn't show up for about 4 months later because it burnt a seal. It leaked into that, but it was a computer controller up there, and it was $3,200 to fix. So
this, in ladder one, it was the result of damage that occurred while fighting fire then?
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Do we have any recourse to, I can't imagine you build the
We
people
don't.
whose fire you're fighting or something like that.
No, and that was a sketchy situation. We almost had 2 firefighters seriously injured in that. If you see the pictures of where that happened, that was a very unforeseen event. Our Medic 2, which is our second oldest ambulance, has had some suspension issues this year that have cost about $2,300. That ambulance, I believe, is victim of the viaduct project. It went over that viaduct project about 10,000 times. So it needed some suspension work this year. So, but all the other vehicles are within their budget, and the predicted budget's 26, 22 if we do oil changes. The other factor is that we're 16% up in run volume this year. So, and as I'm sure Richard knows from fleet management, the more you run a vehicle, the more oil changes you have to do. So especially with our ambulances, we will do more service this year because we're certainly up on the run volume.
So here's a question, Stephen, for next year. Next year, if we actually do open a DPW facility, I presume that we will be more capable of doing vehicle maintenance there. Will any of the routine maintenance, oil change, we're not asking them to do a transmission change, but routine maintenance be done in-house, and how do we hope that impacts these costs?
That is the goal. We will certainly we will be equipped in terms of lifts and space to do that. Certifications for that type of service and things like that are something that we will target. That is the goal. How that plays out and what it takes to get there is something will be an ongoing effort. But yeah, our goal is to take some of that stuff in-house.
Okay, so in theory, if we do that, we would underspend the budget to the extent that we could bring some of it in-house.
Yeah, for national average, if and I have documentation I can supply you on it, for the value of our fleet and the mileage and usage, we're spending way under what, and I've got a document for a class I just went to. Even at the 35,000, we're still way under what we normally, because we do a bunch of stuff in-house, so.
That's fine. You answered my question.
Yep.
The next one is ambulance billing.
So that's a good problem.
It says % of revenue collected, so we pay commission to
Yep.
the outside firm?
3% on collected revenue.
So that means that you expect revenue to go up $200,000 if 3% is $9,000?
So we're short, so we're going to be short this year. I'm going to transfer within my current budget from other sources to cover this year, because our revenue is basically outperforming our projections. And we're assuming it's going to continue to not grow at the same rate, but we're going to need additional money to cover based on what we're probably going to spend this year.
So Paul, my question for you is, if the chief is saying we're actually overspending the $23,000 budget because we're over-collecting whatever you budgeted, that's what I thought you said, will eventually this line item show what we actually expended
Yes.
as he transfers it? Okay,
Right, as
so
he transfers, right,
It may not show, because we don't show your expenses to date. That's the one line
Right,
we
Right,
don't have.
because I haven't run out of money yet.
So, right, so you expect you're going to spend over that $23,000 this year,
I
so
am.
budget to budget, you may be up $9,000, but actual to budget, you'll be up less than $9,000, is that?
Right. Well, I'm going to take it from another source this year.
Right, but you're actually going to spend the money.
Yes.
Actual this year to next year's budget.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what he's looking, and the last one is that the similar question to the police chief is training. Just talk a little bit about that training budget that's going up.
Are you talking about the $5,000 increase?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we project that under the collective bargaining agreement, we pay partial tuitions for fire-related training. That's actually been down because I haven't had people taking advantage of the program. Obviously, we replaced 8 people in the last few years. We have a younger crowd. They're looking for schooling, so it's a contract obligated. So that's been down in years past, and now it's.
Okay, so that's what that CBA tuition, collective bargaining tuition reimbursement is?
Yes,
what
sir.
that- Okay, thank you. Answered my questions. Anybody else have, Marie?
Could you just educate me on the ambulance money?
Mm-hmm.
So the revenues you bring in, it doesn't go into the general fund, it goes into the ambulance fund.
Yes.
And the ambulance fund money is spent on ambulances. Anything else?
It offsets our budget. Do you want to?
Yeah, it basically offsets a number of items in their budget. I mean, even personnel. I mean, we don't pinpoint it anymore like we originally did. It actually comes in as an estimated receipt, so it can be used, basically for anything in the fire department. But again, it's going to offset personnel, it's going to offset vehicle maintenance, it's going to offset gas and oil.
So we see the
employee
budget right
benefits.
here. There's
Yep.
no secondary budget where the
No.
ambulance funds are. All your costs are here.
Everything.
All the costs are there.
Okay. And then I guess my next question is actually for you, and that is, the insurance premiums, is that for liability for the work they're doing?
That is, we charge the ambulance 1/3 of the police fire injury on duty insurance that we have. And that represents 1/3 of that total cost. That one line item there, that's now $32,000.
And why is it only 1/3 for EMS if they got
We
the,
basically look at it as basically look at it as 1/3 fire department, 1/3 police department, 1/3 ambulance.
okay. So the fire department, so what about the ambulance third?
That is the ambulance third.
That's the ambulance
That's the
third.
only
The other two-
And the police third.
The other 2/3 will be paid out of the liability insurance account.
Okay, I get that. All right, thank you.
Tom?
So, I know for a while we had to cut back on schools, bringing people into schools to do training about fire safety. But you've returned that program?
Yeah.
How long's that been back? Is it?
We've returned and probably accelerated it. So what the grant you're probably speaking about is the SAFE grant. So that was refunded or fully funded through the legislature. Actually, Rep. Ash put the bill in for that. So that's back in play. We're doing that again. We actually got a little bit of extra money this year, so we have Senior Safe. So we'll be doing some education down the senior center. More importantly, we've already started. We're doing home visits and supplying smoke detectors to those in need, or recommending the proper detectors. So.
Yeah, which is really good, because you would think that seniors would be aware of fire safety, but I think people get lax, and You know, I think it's
Yeah,
important that you do some home
and we
visits,
have
yeah.
two programs right now that we're doing, one at Genesis House and one at Emerson Manor. Obviously, that's a captured audience for us, so
Well,
that,
it's pretty consolidated
yeah.
living
and-
space.
But we do,
Yeah.
we look at our fire data, and we do respond to a lot of burnt food, pot holders on the stove, you know, some smaller fires in those facilities, so by using our data, we put our resources to that, so.
Great. Well, because it's a big asset to the community, because, you know, fires affect,
Yeah,
they
and
can
just-
affect the whole neighborhood.
Yeah, just along those lines, so we did the reorganization over the past 2 years. Our inspectional program, we completely revamped that over the last year. That's in full play now. So we're dealing much better with the commercial customers, we're invoicing, so that position is on its way to being very self-sufficient as far as the revenue generated from inspectional fees. And it's in fact better received than I thought it would be, especially for the commercial customers. They appreciate us coming in. A lot of them are corporate-based. Their corporate entities want to see us be inspected because they can show it to their insurance companies. So that's actually been working. It's exceeded my expectation. I thought when we started sending invoices to businesses that we'd get negative feedback, and it's just been just the opposite. Are we next? So.
Okay. And Chief Stankiewicz, and we still continue to do the walk-in school bus and different things for young people to have access to officers in a positive way. I know that's been.
Absolutely. I mean, that's our core value, is to work within the community. Sergeant Manzafero is really big on the walk-in school bus. He's in schools all the time. We have an SRO at the high school. We're looking to put another SRO in middle schools eventually. But yeah, we do the walk-in school bus, Halloween safety, things like that. We'd always like to do more, but right now we're just running into some trying times with staffing issues. But we'll overcome that hurdle. We'll get back in the mix. Yes.
But do we ever have officers like posted at schools or spend a day at a school? Or
Yeah, every day we have officers who go to each one of the who are assigned. Our day shift officers are assigned to visit one of the schools. So we have them going to schools and engage with the not only the students but also the administration and staff.
Oh, great. Good.
And that-
Thank you.
besides our SROs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Marie, do you have something?
You talked about revenue increase this year in the ambulance. What are you anticipating if you're looking at trends? Increase over last year?
Right now, we are 24% as of the end of February.
And what's the dollar amount of that?
Last year, at the end of February, we were at 481,796. This year, at the end of February, we were 598,062.
What's the difference? What is it? What are your trending? How much more money are you expecting next year? Is it 100?
Yeah, 20, yeah,
About 20%.
20%, yeah.
Well, what's 20%?
We're going to be,
$100,000.
100,000. That's what I was
Yeah.
trying to figure out. 100,000.
yeah, so from 2015, we were at 539,000, and in the FY18, we finished at 801. We project to be in the mid-nines this year, so.
Okay, so when I see increase in your budget, we're also seeing the increase of revenues that will go into that budget.
Right.
Correct.
Their reliance, the fire department reliance on the tax levy has actually gone down over the last 2 or 3 years because of the ambulance revenue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just want to take a look next at the next section of the budget, which is planning and community development, and that includes the planning board, the zoning board of appeals, the Department of Inspection, Zoning Enforcement, Conservation Commission, the Historic Commission, the Historic District Commission, and the total for the planning and community development is going from, actually it's a decrease from $194,077 in the current fiscal year to a proposed $192,780 next year. And so I guess the question is, does anybody have any particular questions about any of the line items in planning and community development? Go ahead.
For Paul, a question is, are we doing all the?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jumped up fast.
You may leave.
Mark, can I just make one comment?
Sure.
Recognize one of my officers. He's
Sure.
retiring after 13 years on a job, effective tomorrow. Officer Jeff Myers, a very effective officer in our community. He primarily worked the 4 to 12 shift for the last 13 years, but he's going to be sorely missed and be difficult to replace him. So I just wanted to recognize
Great,
him.
thanks for saying that. I appreciate that, Chief.
So Chief, now he did a lot of the cybersecurity stuff.
Yes, he
Will we
did.
have somebody be replacing that, or, who's going to step up, or?
One day at a time.
Yeah.
Johnny's going back
Let
to
his seat
school.
get cold a little bit, right? Yeah.
Marie,
Thanks.
go ahead on planning and community development.
Yeah, you've done a lot in really organizing the fees, and really I've seen a big increase. Are we doing everything that other towns are doing, or is there some other area that you think we should be looking for inspections or fees?
No, I think our fees are pretty, standard with the rest of the communities. More than some, less than some. The rental properties helped out, foreclosed properties. We've probably 120 registered rental properties right now. Foreclosures went down. We probably have 16 or so on the books. But there's more out there. My secretary Sharon's doing a great job tracking them down. She looks online, finds them, sends a letter out. Yeah, I think we're good.
Is the Airbnb bylaw going to increase work for you? Do you have to go out and inspect those also?
Yeah, it's coming down the road. They'll have to get inspected. Building code is trying to deal with it, but they haven't come up with something concrete right now. But we talk about a lot at our monthly meetings. Berkshire's up in that area. They have a lot bigger problems because of bigger houses, and a bunch of college kids go up and rent them for a weekend, and it's not made for that. There's no sprinkler systems. But in Long Meadow, we have, I think, 3 that I know of. I'm sure there's more out there, but that's what I know.
And also, I know there was some discussion at that MVP meeting about the group homes, that we don't know how many there are and where they are.
Yeah.
Are other towns able to request registration?
I'm not sure if you can actually request it, but we have a good idea of where they are in Long Meadow, most of them anyway. There's a couple of new ones that popped up recently on White Oak. But they don't have to notify the town or anything.
We don't have to check for safety issues?
The only
in
way
those?
that's coming too, actually, in the next code edition, I believe, is those kind of facilities are going to have to get sprinklered. Depending on the occupancy number. But I know the state is dealing with that right now.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have a particular concern, and Paul, this isn't necessarily specific to you, but as much as the town manager, and Steve and I have expressed this to you 10 million times, not the last time, which was yesterday, I think, about our bylaw enforcement by intent versus by response to complaints. And I guess my question in general is, if we wanted to move, if the town residents compelled us to move to bylaw inspection by intent instead of by response, what kind of additional resources would it take?
I mean, you'd have to add, I think, at least 1, probably 2 FTEs. Because, I'll give the example of the overnight parking bylaw, you would have to have an inspector working overnight. So you'd probably have to run 3 shifts to really do that effectively. And, they'd be out basically driving around all day looking for stuff. I don't know that that's a scenario that townspeople would embrace. People will drive around looking for things. I mean, I'll be candid, Mark. When this comes up, it's in the context of a small number of people complaining about a particular issue a number of times. And, but by and large, I would say our code enforcement is actually very good. We're getting an excellent value for the code enforcement. Paul does an excellent job. In fact, he helped, by staying on top of a house, like for example, today on Hazardville Road, by staying on top of it and issuing fines. And these are, the ability to issue fines was a bylaw change that Paul brought forward. that we adopted, and now we're doing that, it compelled them to clean the place up. So I think we and I want to give Paul most of the credit, we've gained a lot of ground over the last few years in our ability to manage that type of stuff. I mean, it would be a significant increase in resources to be able to do, like, to have people going around full-time enforcing all of our bylaws.
So I guess-
General bylaws.
Yeah, and I guess the question then comes to the role that our different departments play in. For example, when police who are driving around town routinely come across a ridiculous pothole, do they call the DPW or note it at the end? So Chief's shaking his head. Of course they do. But when they're driving by and they see a fire hydrant a week after a storm that still isn't plowed out, do they call up the chief of police or the fire department or somebody else and say, here's a violation? And I suspect that they're less intent on the fire hydrants aren't plowed out than they are, or the sidewalks that aren't plowed than they are on the potholes, or there's a tree branch down or something like that. And that, because I would hate to say, yeah, we need to have somebody in the housing and code enforcement driving around on the 4 to 12 shift on the outside chance that there's a car parked on the street. I mean, that just makes no sense at all. But the police are driving around. If they see somebody parked on the street overnight, you would think that they're enforcing the bylaws. I mean, that you've answered my question, I guess, so we'll
I mean,
move
I
on.
get reports from the police a lot of time about unregistered vehicles and stuff like that on the properties. If they see something, if they go to a call, they'll tell me.
All right.
I mean, I know you said it's your question. I mean, the big thing, Mark, is we're never going to achieve perfection on it. But like I said, I think what tools do we have in place and how do we deploy them? I think we do really well with what we have. We could certainly improve, but we're never going to catch them all, I don't think.
And I understand that. I think the frustration I hear from people is that but we're not even trying unless somebody complains, and I don't want to be the one to complain on my neighbor.
Yeah, I mean, I think.
But I think if that's not true, then we've got to make sure we, are verbal and do enough to show people we're not ignoring bylaw. Like you showed me a list of here's how many fire hydrants. I mean, after I complained, you got a list from the fire chief. Here's how many fire hydrants. Police chief. Okay, how many fire hydrant people we've got. I mean, I think it's important for people to see that besides just me, because now I have a thing to go back to people and say it's not just that we're not doing anything about it. We are being to some degree proactive. So, anyway, that's my comments on that item. Okay, I think, does anybody else have any questions on the planning and community development? No. So we're going to go next in line, and unfortunately there's DPW, and there's a couple of DPW sections, so we're going to take 2 or 3 of them at a time. There's highway administration and streets, there's grounds and maintenance, town building maintenance, and I guess that's, I don't know if that's all of those, but that's most of those. So the question is, does anybody have any questions about those? Marie, go ahead.
The 19,000 decrease in traffic control.
That's mostly due to a lot of the accidents that we've seen over the few years and replacements of those cabinets and equipment. So we have experienced a decrease of calls to our vendor, and that's being reflected there.
So it's the trends
Yes.
town manager was talking about. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any question? I just have a question to try to understand this shift to office manager. I understand it wasn't a additional person, but it's a shift, but it shows up in 2 or 3 of these sections. I think people need to understand that the overall cost of our DPW is split into 5 or 6 different buckets.
Or it's 5, almost 5 different funds between general fund, water fund, sewer fund, recycling fund,
Right,
and
more
the
than 5.
stormwater fund.
Sure.
Right, so there's different sources and
Right, and there's different allocations.
The
of
allocations are administration, streets, grounds maintenance, building maintenance, sanitation and recycling, water, sewers, and stormwater.
Yep.
Those are the ones that,
Well,
here.
like-
So,
like the director's salary is split amongst each of those, a percentage of each of those accounts. The office manager is an existing position, an existing employee. A new position was created, we promoted from within, but it really elevated the capacity for managing the finances of those functions that we do try to run as best we can like businesses, and try and manage our work order systems and things like that. So, and that office manager touches all of those different divisions. That's why the increase came out of each of those.
So for example, when it says, just on the highway administration, staff clerical, that going up, is that because the office manager's salary is now in there that wasn't, or that it reflects an increase in the salary of the person who was doing one job and has now been upgraded to office
It's
clerical?
an increase in salary for the person
It's the
who,
latter, yeah.
yeah, who got upgraded.
So that was a significant change in, if you will, evaluation or
Responsibility.
responsibility.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like an 8.5% increase in.
Yeah, it is, and it is a significant change in responsibility.
Okay. All right, but at least that explains it. So, because it comes up with that as well. So the other thing is, I guess I was struck by the reduction in repairs, building, and maintenance by $1,700. And it's under grounds maintenance, but then there's actually building, it says repairs and maintenance buildings. I mean, it's not a big dollar amount, but we've only
I
had
assume that's based on a trend.
$4,200 in the budget, now we have $2,500 in the budget. Well, but if you look at past years, the past 3 years, we spent $2,500, $5,300, $7,200, then $2,500. So, you know, is 1 year at $2,500 a trend? I'm not sure.
Mario, that's one. It looks like you requested amount less.
I usually put notes on the side, and
Yeah,
there's no note there, so I assume that came from the finance department. There's not too many reductions. The traffic controller that Marie asked about was certainly mine, but I don't remember this one.
I just, that's one that, you know, if you'd been consistently at $2,500, I could see making it $2,500, but it's been as high, you know, especially when we talk about the need to maintain maintenance in buildings.
I don't even look
So,
at this.
I just
Grounds.
question that.
The grounds.
Yeah.
So,
I have a question.
go ahead, Marie.
The tree planting,
Right.
we're gutting the budget. I know it says let's get tree trimming under control, but I think we were trying to catch up on, we're so behind in the planting.
So, not all that different than the fire chief's comments. We will be coming to town meeting, and you guys have seen the draft articles. We'll be coming for extra money to fund our forestry line item, which is our removals, our trimmings, and our stump grinding. And I think that was funded at $125,000, and we've consistently spent well over that, and so we're coming to town meeting asking for 50 more. We've asked for 50 more in this budget. I think, I don't want to speak for you, but I think the way to give us that extra money in that category was a reduction in the planting budget.
Okay, so I'm confused. You're going to town for a special warrant article. Where's the money coming for the,
For the special warrant article, would come out of free cash,
will come out of free cash?
right, for the end of, for the remainder of this fiscal year.
But not for next year?
Not for next year, for the remainder of
Okay.
this fiscal year.
In next year, there is a approved at this moment increase to that line item, which is a trend that has happened over the last few years. I think the way finance and the town manager is trying to fund it is by reducing the planting budget. I don't want to speak for you, but does that about some of it?
Overall, both of them are, overall, when you look at both of them,
I know.
there's an increase of $33,000.
I know, but the problem is we've been underplanting for years now, ever since we had the 2011 storm. And we were hoping to trend back.
And last year's expenditures, everything went towards trimming because they were so far behind with
Right.
dangerous trees and dangerous limbs that I think the priority is to get those trees under control first before we can actually start planting replacements.
Okay. And that brings up another question is, did we even use up our planting budget last year? Did we,
Yes.
we did
We had
plant?
a fall planting, and we're having another one in the spring.
Okay, and so last year you spent the 50.
We will spend the 50. I think we were about halfway through that, and like I said, we're doing a spring planting.
And what does the tree committee say about this change in the direction?
I don't know that they've seen that, to be honest with you.
Okay.
The tree warden is not thrilled, I can tell you that.
He's not thrilled.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, Dave Marinelli, our tree warden, who's new as tree warden this year, we could give him 10 times that amount, and he wouldn't be satisfied.
Yeah, but still, we're
he's been
kinda
very good. And Marie, I do want to
Going down
correct you
40.
on that. If we're deficient in something, it's trimming and handling trees that are at the end of life. That deficiency is greater than our planting deficiency, which is why we're focusing on trying to get that under control. I think if we're able to gain more ground on handling the dangerous trees, then I think we can see in future years being more aggressive with planting.
And that's some of the reason why we're supplementing this fiscal year, is if we can get a hold of it this year, that money can be transferred next year into planting if need be, if they are caught up with the trimming.
Right. I know. We're going to talk about the budget another night too, right? It's not going to just be tonight.
Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe. I mean, if you
Yeah.
just write it down. If you want to
Yeah, I want to.
propose some changes, then
Yeah.
make sure you get your
Okay.
licks in.
That's kind of what we can approve it through.
What? Yeah, but Stephen wants it all wrapped up tonight.
Yeah,
rather
there's
than-
going to be no vote tonight.
Because otherwise we're
We
going to
talked
be.
about it. We talked about potential vote tonight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
otherwise we're going to be here
Okay.
Monday. But Monday, we're not going to finish tonight because we have to do the capital projects Monday.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, does anybody else have any other questions for our DPW director? Or about the DPW, those parts of you'll be back for water and sewer or
Okay.
whatever it is, I suspect. But what I want to do is next look at the, I guess we're calling it as the,
Community services.
yeah, community services budget. Community services is, we've got the library, I don't know how the library kind of snuck in there, but we've got Parks and Recreation, Veterans, Board of Health, Cultural Council,
Council on Aging.
yeah, and the Council on Aging, right. So I don't know if anybody has any questions on any of those.
Except for Bailey.
Marie? Yeah, Barry, why don't you? Sure, come on.
Yeah.
Come on down, Barry.
Before you ask my questions, can I comment, not on behalf of the tree committee, but maybe offer some information? I know, I think we have yet to discuss that as a committee, but there have been funds that have been requested, for example, through the Community Preservation Act for Bliss Park, which was pretty substantial. I know there's grants, and I would expect that with future projects like the new Council on Aging and the ADA pathway at Bliss Park, there will, I know the tree warden will probably want input into adding trees into those projects.
Okay, thank you.
Is that,
Yeah.
now your
No,
question?
No, my question is, so you're increasing the daycare, how is the revenue coming on daycare? Is it covering its costs?
It is covering its costs, so the small increase is due to step increases, not addition of staff. And as far as I know, we still have wait lists in the infant room and the toddler rooms, and the preschool's trending as well.
And will your budget go up when you get the whole building?
As far as staff, as far as the general
Staff
fund,
and
what you
everything.
see, no. I think our primary source of revenue is within the recreation revolving fund. So we plan to add programs to increase revenue, which would increase expenses, but I don't think you would see that on the general fund side.
And how much revenue, like I was asking the chief, are you projecting dollar amount coming next? Do you think there's going to be an increase next year?
With the new building or with the fiscal year?
Just fiscal year?
We do. We expect an increase. Our revenue mix is different than, it's not just program fees. We have donations, we have grants, which other departments do as well. We have sponsorships, so our revenue is a little mixed, with the primary source of revenue being the user fees for the programs.
Thank you.
Bill, I don't know if you have any questions, but I don't have any questions. I mean, the budgets are pretty straightforward. The overall budgets for the planning and community development is going from 190. It's going down from $199,000 to $192,800. So it's about only. There's something wrong here, Paul, because it says it's a $1,200 decrease, but it's actually more in the budget decrease. But I guess I just wanted to comment, Gene. I think you came in after the original presentation from the library, but Stephen explained the changes to the library of putting in the maintenance costs of the budget and some of the increases that are into the library. So I just thought you ought to know that. I think that's been explained to us at least twice, so the people at home heard the changes to the library, and I don't know if anybody else had any comments about that. There's a big percentage, a very low number in the Board of Health supplies, so it's not really worth discussing. But I know if people look at percentages, things pop up but it looks like you spent $200 on something else, and all of a sudden the percentage went way up, Beverly. So I'm not sure it's worth commenting on, other than the people who look at percentages instead of numbers. But if you want to, you're welcome to. So, but I think that I don't have any other comments about the community service, the total community service budget. Again, it's an increase of 4.5% of the total community services, but primarily that reflects on the increase of putting maintenance costs from DPW into the library to impact the entire community services department. So, Marie, any other questions?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So the next in the line item here is just debt services, and I think just people at town ought to know that debt service payments are decreasing, primarily as we pay off existing debt. The debt service payments are going to go down 6.5%, which is a reduction of $323,500. But don't get too excited, because our employee benefits, which are retiree and health insurance and other things, are going up 7.5%. And that's just, I think, the cost of doing business in the town. So the one thing that I guess I didn't ask our DPW when we had the chance is, one of the things that's on our town warrant for May is purchase of the streetlights. And if that is approved, would that impact, Paul, or might that impact the budget in fiscal year 2020, recognizing we may be 6 months into the budget before we pull any of that off?
Yeah, I think we'd have to get a sense of the projection of the timeline after if town meeting approves the warrant article, and we move into the design and like I say, negotiations with Eversource. I think like Westcom will be able to look ahead and say, on February 20th, we're going to switch over and start, we won't have to pay the rental fees anymore, and then every month we're going to do, every week we'll do 20 or 30 lights, and you can probably come up with a projection. I'm sure our consultant could do that for us, but that's all going to hinge entirely on when certain benchmarks get hit.
And then we may have to shift it into debt service to pay off the debt.
Right.
Right, but
We would have to look at it in the fall. So
Okay,
there's
but-
just not enough information.
Okay, but people need to understand that we're looking at things to impact expenses in that way, at least. So, okay, the other remaining budget line items or budget sections are our enterprise funds, which are water, sewer, solid waste, and then stormwater fees. And I think we beat the stormwater fees to death earlier this evening, Marie. I don't know if you have any additional question. And the other water, sewer are pretty much the cost of water from the city of Springfield and then our allocated cost. The only difference for me is that we changed the allocation to the stormwater to include a stormwater department. And I guess, Paul, my question for you is, a few years ago, we did this time study to try to look at allocation of DPW costs between, what I'll call the different departments, but general, general
Right.
revenue and then the enterprise funds.
Right.
Is there a way of looking at either the old data, assess it for how we put something into the stormwater, or whether we,
Are you referring to labor or all budget items?
primarily it was labor, I think, that we used for
Right,
the study
we
for.
did that study on labor, and the way that we'd have to refine it almost, because it was not there before, would be to go through that same process over a period of time, and have the DPW employees mark down their time, what they're spending it on, and what fund they're expending it in.
I think we still do that.
Well, I only say that because the allocation of the salaries, and I'm just looking at the top
Right.
line, okay? You know, and I'll just, water and, the stormwater fund get more than the sum of the water and the sewer. And I'm just wondering if that's truly justified. It's actually the same as administration and streets, which seems to me to be awfully high as an allocation of salaries. Marie, that was the separate allocation that I asked Paul to do for us. I don't know if you
Yeah, I
saw
saw
that.
that.
And I just think that there's something wrong there. I mean, granted, it was an arbitrary prior to that, when we were doing water and sewer, it was like a 25, 25, 50 or something like that, and so we undertook this study. But it seems to me we're allocating an awful lot of labor costs to the stormwater utility
I
fund.
mean, the only thing that we could do is we could start that project over again and find out what actually is going on over a period of time again. Because, again, it was started last year. There was a percent that was
Right,
established
and you
last year.
did it over a
carried
few
forward.
years, and you
Right.
you moved to the answer.
Right, but, right, we would have to start that process over again with the DPW employees and specifically ask which areas they are working in. I think we did it one day a week over a period of 6 or 9, and probably over a longer period of time, because we wanted to get everything seasonal. And we'd probably have to do that same type of study in order to tweak that to something that is going to reflect the actual history.
I mean, I recommend we do it, and I only do that because I absolutely believe that the labor allocation to stormwater is $240,000, which is the same as the administration of streets. I think that's, it's got $240,000 for administration, $243,000 for grounds, $15,000 for building and maintenance, $100,000 for sanitation, $200,000 for water, $125,000 for sewer, and then a whopping, in my opinion, our editorializing, $240,000 for storm sewer. So Marie, when you talk about storm sewer costs and allocations, much of it is under our control, and I think it's been misallocated.
I think what happened when we originally did it, Mark, is if you look under streets and administration and streets,
Yeah.
those amounts are actually equal.
Right.
Right,
The stormwater, so they were just cut in half originally, and we'd have to go through and actually do some type of study to tweak those.
I agree. I think we did that with all the line items. Ones we knew were specific for stormwater, catch basin cleaning, drain repairs. We allocated 100% of that in this. Others were 25% based on how much we thought, like street sweeping, and that might have been 50-50. But that's exactly what happened with the salaries. We took half of the general fund highway folks and allocated it to stormwater. I'm not saying it's right, I'm telling you that was the
I just
math.
think it was arbitrary, and I think that's the issue, Marie, and that's where I'd go after this budget. I think it was a convenient way for us to allocate money out of the general
It
funds.
wasn't really arbitrary. I mean, we looked at how much we spend on stormwater management broadly, and that includes inlet repairs and things that happen in the streets, but that are a part of, but are still connected to our stormwater system. And I think when we did this the first time, we did spend some time looking at what do we spend on stormwater. And I think that, and I don't remember the formulas or whatever, but I do remember we did estimates of what, Ty and Bond, I think, helped us with that. So that number, that allocation does come from an analysis, but not a time study like you're talking about.
I hear you. I disagree, respectfully disagree. I mean,
You disagree that the analysis happened, or that?
No, I disagree that the analysis is based on, reflects what we really do. I mean, if we're spending an equal amount of Mario Mazza and the engineering time and all that stuff on stormwater as we are on the general street administration, then, I think there's something wrong there. There's some, I mean, we've got 100 miles of streets, and and Marie, you talk about stormwater allocation. I think it was a convenient way to get money out of our budget, out of the tax-based part of the budget, into a utility basis and into a fee-based revenue. I'm just saying that I think it's wrong. And I understand it's so arbitrary. I have no basis to argue against it.
You still are, nevertheless.
Because your basis for arguing for it is
we did some kind of analysis. The other thing is we haven't fully executed all the stormwater functions. So even if we did a time study now, we still don't. It won't be the same 3 years from now as things roll out. I guess what I'm saying is, you can't have it both ways. You can't talk about tax ceiling, and then be like, we want to make sure that, I mean, most communities do the 50, 25, 25. That study was underway when I got here. I thought it was idiotic, because the industry standard that municipal auditors all accept is like a 50, 25, 25, and we're shooting ourselves in the foot from the general fund by drilling down into enterprise fund versus general fund for sport and really no other reason. So that's fine if you want to do that. They did it for the other enterprise funds. We can do it for stormwater, but let's stop talking about how we want to, preserve the ceiling.
I'll take exception to your comment that we did it for sport. We did it because we needed a basis for an allocation beside, and everybody does 50, 25, 25, so we'll do that. Having a basis by saying how much time and effort we spend on these different enterprise funds, because some are paid for out of tax money and some are paid for out of fees.
But there's really no compelling financial need to do it.
There's not a compelling financial need to do anything other than to get it right. And to me, that's enough of a
Okay,
compelling financial
why don't we roll
need.
that over to Monday, too? Yeah.
Because we're going to be talking, all I'm saying is, Marie, you introduced
Yeah, but
this
I
issue
don't,
that the stormwater.
that's not my bugaboo, though.
But my point is, the reason the stormwater expenses are so high is because of this allocation of personnel costs.
I
Doesn't
disagree. I
bother
think
me.
it's the capital projects,
Yeah.
to be honest with you. And I hate to say it, but aren't we splitting hairs, since it's only really funded by 40% through fee and 60% through the general fund anyways?
30, yeah, something like 30.
So,
30.
I mean, until we get fully funded, I think we're wasting our time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to talk to the library. Is that okay?
Sure,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, anyway, we'll
When you did there, I just wanted to let you
Yeah,
know.
we were there.
Yeah, I know, but I just realized it went too fast.
Okay, sorry. Does anybody else have any question for Mario?
Because Barry
about
and Jim would move out of the seats.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions for Mario about the water sewer,
You like to see
stormwater, and
We'll talk about the capital on Monday, right?
yes,
Okay,
we're going to talk about that.
thank you.
Jean, I guess you didn't get off as easy as we thought.
I thought that was too easy.
Yes.
Go ahead, Marie.
I enjoyed your legislative breakfast.
Thank you.
And during the legislative breakfast, it talked about the increase of the cost of CW Mars, is that it?
Correct.
Okay, and it doesn't seem to be going that much up in your budget. Are you absorbing the cost somewhere else? Because it's going up 2% on your budget, but I thought
Right.
it was going up substantially more.
This budget represents half of the cost of the CW Mars network. The other half I pay for with state aid funds.
Okay.
So that's not represented here. Also, our CW Mars cost went down a little bit because previously we were paying network charges through CW Mars, and we discontinued that, and we're getting our network through the town now.
Oh, okay.
So that saved a
Great.
little bit also.
All right, because I know people were talking about the budget was just being eaten by those costs, so I'm glad to hear you're able to keep them under the control, so thank you.
Okay,
That's
you're
it.
welcome. Anything else?
No, that was it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I want to thank Stephen and Paul, though, for working really hard with me on building this budget back up. We really, I think we did a great job with getting closer to the state requirements. So, thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chief. Well, I guess that summarized the budget, but as you can see, we've got 3 of our 5 select board members here, and I'm not really excited about voting on a budget with only 3 out of 5 members, even though.
That's
Oh, I
fine.
still have things I
Yeah.
want to,
Yeah, there's.
I wanna
yeah,
make a few
At 71
changes.
million, there's easily 50 or 60 grand we got to fight over yet on Monday.
oh, no, easily just 4,000, that's it. That's it.
Right. No, that's fine. I agree, Mark. Give Richard and Tom the chance to vote on it.
And we can ask, if we have other questions for the department heads, we'll just send them to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody, the department heads certainly for being here.
Yeah,
Everybody for.
I want to, and not for being here. I want to echo that. I mean, I give Paul most of the credit for doing the budget, and that's deserved, but the department's put in a lot of work on their own end. And, you know, I was actually having this discussion with someone from another town today. Some municipal budgets, you know, they'll add 3% just because they know they're only going to get 1%. As you can see from the budget, we just simply don't do that. They don't do it on their end, and we don't do it on our end. They budget for what they need, and if they need more, they come and they defend it. If they get less, they accept it. And it's a strength of the organization that the budget gets done that way, and I want to commend all of them for really the seriousness with which they take not only developing the budgets but living by them.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all. We had another agenda item, we have another agenda item to look at the town meeting warrant. And because I mean, we're getting down to the wire here. If we don't get this done,
I think we need extra meetings next week.
we're obviously going to need
Yeah.
some extra meetings next week. And alternatively, it's 9:30 here. It's not like we haven't worked past 9:30. It's just that we don't have people here to discuss this stuff.
Yeah.
But at our last meeting 2 weeks ago, a little bit more than 2 weeks ago,
We worked our way through some of that.
we worked our way through some of them, but we've got
They're
more.
gonna do anything.
Right. Yeah, unfortunately, we did the easy ones. And the question is, what I'd like to do is just kind of spend the next 15 minutes going through them, Marie.
Can we just go next week and do it? Because I know there's.
Fine,
there's
I'm just going to
reasons.
schedule a meeting. The problem is, I'm going to schedule a meeting, and with all due respect, Tom won't be able to be here because it's not a Monday night. And I don't know if Richard's going to be here or any of us going to be here. So are we really going to have that many more people here?
I think we will. Yeah.
The other thing is, what we sent out we've been filling out the warrant over the last few days. Descriptions, pulling in more information. We got some stuff from town council today that we folded in. So there's a lot more content in what went out, and so maybe some digestion of that. Mark, in particular, we did what we thought was what you expected on the charter review. I don't know if you
Yeah,
had a chance to look at that.
I saw. I had some comments on it. But
Yeah, so I mean, notwithstanding the fact that tomorrow's my birthday and I want to go home now too.
Oh, no, we have to have an all-day meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, right. You can, it just won't be here.
He won't show up.
Yeah. No, we can meet just fine. I'll let you know where I'm at. No, I just think that there's probably some digestion that has to happen with some of the stuff we put in. We added a lot to it today.
Yeah. Oh, that's
And I mean, I could go through quickly what we added, but we're going to go article
You
by
just
article
have to
anyway.
repeat it. Yeah.
Are you going to send that out to us?
It was in the packet today.
Even
Oh, what?
daytime
Oh,
today,
okay.
during the day, I'm more flexible also, evenings or daytime, if you want to do an afternoon meeting.
Yeah, the earliest we can have it next week is Tuesday or Wednesday if we post it tomorrow. So it's probably going to be a Wednesday evening meeting.
Wednesday evening's fine.
Bill, can you
Thursday.
make it Wednesday?
Should we text Tom?
No. It doesn't matter to text them now. I'll touch base with them. It'll be either Wednesday or Thursday of next week.
If we could do, well, the finance committee is meeting Wednesday.
Wednesday, yeah.
So maybe a 6 o'clock start. I could we could do, where we could split.
We're not going to get
Duties.
through this in an hour.
But we have a regular meeting Monday, which will be 4 hours.
But our regular meeting has an agenda that's packed to the brim with other stuff.
I think we'll be, I think, let's see how we do. But I mean, you should put a meeting in for.
Oh, yeah.
For Wednesday or Thursday, for sure.
Well, I'm going to go for Thursday only because if the Finance Committee is Wednesday,
Well, we'll hear what their points are, so.
Maybe. I don't know, no, they're not gonna report that night. They have a series of meetings with the department heads that they're doing before they make their recommendation. I believe that you won't see the recommendation till 27th, I don't think, at the earliest.
Yeah, I don't know who they have invited for next week.
It's DPW and Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec, and I know they were supposed to hear from Capital Planning last night, and for some reason, there must have been some miscommunication, but they're going to have to reschedule Capital Planning at one of their next meetings also.
yeah,
So whether they all do that on next Wednesday, I'm not sure.
I mean, we've got a full agenda, Marie, for Monday night. I don't know if you saw it come out today, but I mean,
I
I
didn't
know
look at it yet.
it's a
So
full
we
agenda,
could,
so
I'll
we're gonna have
book
to do this.
Wednesday, Thursday, whatever you
Wednesday,
want.
the other
I think it's going to be Thursday only because I don't want to compete. I want to make sure Paul can be with us if he needs to be, and he might need to be at the Finance Committee too. So,
So that's good for you, Bill?
Yep.
yeah,
Thursday's
okay.
fine.
All right.
Did you want to make it early, like start at 6, depending on how long we're going to go?
Yeah,
I mean, if we're going to do the warrant and the budget,
that's what we need to do.
then we might want a long
Okay, all
meeting.
right.
So talk to everybody else, but I'll keep my evening free.
Start at 6 and we'll bring him dinner. So, all right. All right, if that's the sense of the group, that's what we're going to do. With that, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Bill? All in favor? Marie's motion, Bill's second. We adjourned at 9:30. Thank you.
Thank you.